Hey, how goes it, everyone? What's up? Yellow. Hi. How's everyone doing this fine, wonderful Sunday? It does seem like I am now perpetually doing streams on Sundays. Ayo. Zimster. Yes! It is I, the Zimzilla. How's everyone doing today? Read the digital version of JXK, The Hunted Man. I thought it was okay-ish. Yep. So I'm thinking what I'm probably gonna do is leave GX, The Hunted, the comic that I got from my store. It came in 2 days ago. Bought it, taking a few notes here and there. So I do have some things I want to say. And yeah. And we're going to see my sister. She's not even a big Godzilla, and she still enjoyed it. That's great to hear. I love to hear stuff like that. The comic was ass. I think it's okay. It's kind of standard fare when it comes to at least what the MonsterVerse is doing with its comics. It's no Rulers of Earth. It's no Godzilla in Hell. It's just kind of middling, if that makes any sort of sense. For the comics, I would say, I think, at least in my rankings, Godzilla Awakening, I think, is still the best comic. Dominion's pretty good, Kingdom Kong, and then this are like the three comics I think are interchangeable in terms of how good I think they are. They're not as like, they all do their job pretty well. At least I think, however, my problem with this comic is that it is specifically being marketed as the prequel to New Empire. So if there's a lot of stuff that gets contradicted in New Empire, then it's the fault of like Legendary for trying to market this comic as a prequel and then just choosing to ignore stuff that happens in it. Like, if you're gonna make a multimedia franchise, the only thing you should be doing is keeping everything consistent. And they do have like a mythology team to settle out differences, and it doesn't see. I'm not sure if like how much like control they have and stuff like that, or whether it's like the people like telling them that, oh, this is a comic we want to see and do it, and then like the people movie side are like, oh, just kind of get to do whatever. Just dropping my party right now, so I'll watch the rest of the stream another time. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, I totally forgot. Happy St. Patrick's Day, guys. Be Irish. Go plant a car bomb in someone's car who's English. Don't actually do that, and not even in Minecraft. Oh no, I'm not wearing green. Well, yeah, I just realized I'm always wearing green, so I don't have to worry about it. Plus, my stream's green. So if you guys are in the stream chat and you're not wearing green, you're technically green if I highlight your comments. So there you go. Random question: do you prefer a Godzilla horror film or a musical horror film? Easily. That goes without question. But besides the comic that we're going to be talking about, we have 4 videos, and I put in my watch later. They're going to be talking about Godzilla and the MonsterVerse, American Godzilla movie, stuff about D-Man, and then the big meat and potatoes is going to be like the Wingard Yamazaki interview conversation thing. So that's going to be pretty fun to look at. And then we'll talk about the comic, and if people want to jump on after I talk about the comic, you guys are welcome to do so if you have a few thoughts. So I'm not gonna like have people on stay on the entire time. I am planning in the future, where we're like in regards to doing the Kaiju Creator Roundtable again. And it's just a matter of time and all that. It's probably either gonna be like a Monday or a Tuesday, and I'm thinking, with how work has been and the fact that I've been doing Sunday streams, I may just do like a double up stream while I work on some smaller content, because right now, at least the big things that I'm working on are the Kilo Kaiju review, the Exidio game review, and then I have some articles and other stuff that I'm working on. So there is that. What did D-Man get himself into? So for anyone wondering, no, this does not necessarily have to do with D-Man himself. He's not in trouble. Me and him don't have beef. If that was what you were tuning into the stream and wondering about, no, it's stuff that has to do with mostly stuff regarding behind the scenes stuff. So like MonsterVerse behind the scenes things and the like, which I just found interesting and I wanted to comment on. So don't worry, D-Man's not in any trouble. How do you think people should handle their biases when critiquing a movie? I think like at least making it known is important, and then making an understanding that's like, hey, this is where my bias will take me, and just like showing your work essentially whenever you're critiquing something is important because at least it allows people who are looking at your work to understand where you're coming to with a certain thought. Sad, lol. I mean, Derek's a good guy. I just found like it was at least interesting what he said in the video, and I had some thoughts. So that's kind of why I included it on the roster. It's kind of like the odd one out since it has really nothing to do with like the writing of the MonsterVerse, but it has stuff to do with scenes and stuff for people who might have been curious about things like that. So there's that. Besides the fact that we're doing the streaming here on YouTube, I should technically also be streaming on Facebook as well. So obviously, since I'm paying for StreamYard now, it allows me to do some other stuff, which is fun. And I can also do some streaming to other places as well. So I'm probably gonna link up my Twitch, and we'll do some streaming there as well. So we'll see how that goes in the near future. Don't expect too much, but yeah, that's the fun part of things. And I'm not sure if I can actually even see comments that are coming in from the Facebook stream, but you know how things are. But let's get into it with the first guy, Spencer Gurley. Garley, Gurley. You'll see it. So it's not me trying to insult him or anything, but presentations. Streamception. I think probably once I get my dual monitor set up, I won't have to worry about the streamception occurring, but there we go. Audio should be good for you guys. I will be monitoring the chat somewhere else, so in case something occurs, just let me know if you guys literally just cannot hear me, which in that case, I deeply apologize. So let us begin.
Godzilla has evolved over the past 70 years, but what Godzilla movie will we be talking about another 70 years from now, and which ones will be forgotten? There's one recent Godzilla movie that truly stands out to me as being one of those timeless films. Godzilla Minus One took the box office by storm, and for good reason. I went to go see it just once in the theaters during its limited release window, and man, talk about a timeless film.
I'm just gonna speed it up purely because you talked kind of slow, like with video essay stuff. Even though it's like only 5 minutes, like I'm sorry, very little has actually been said, and this is mostly setup, and it's like only a 5-minute video. It's like just get to the point.
Movie made me feel like with simple execution, you can create a timeless classic. And the fact that it came out in black and white for a while as well also speaks to the longevity that most likely will come from this film. Gareth Edwards, director of the 2014 Godzilla film, attended a screening of Godzilla Minus One, and he described a feeling of jealousy while watching this film, saying, "This is what a Godzilla movie should be like." Look at the first Godzilla movie for a moment. This is as simple as it gets, and the fact we're still talking about it today has to count for something. According to Godzilla Minus One director Yamazaki, his Godzilla would remain...
Besides the fact that the film's good, the reason why we're talking about it so much is because it was like the first of its kind in Japan, and it was pretty poignant at the time, so that explains that.
Close to the themes of the 1954 original film. He said, "I love the original Godzilla, and I felt it should stay true to that spirit, addressing the issues of war and nuclear weapons." With that said, consider the limited budget of Minus One, literally a fraction of what Hollywood spends on blockbuster films, and look how they were able to win this year's Oscar for Best Visual Effects. Very impressive, to say the least. Now, switching focus to the restless side of Godzilla films. These three films represent a restless Godzilla, in my opinion. Now, restless can be a good thing, and what I mean by that is that they're...
I just want to go back real quick just to hear why he brought up
on
the word
films,
restless.
and how they were able to win this year's Oscar for Best Visual Effects. Very impressive, to say the least.
So, restless often physical emotional rest involving constant active or emotional.
Now, switching focus to the restless side of Godzilla films. These three films represent a restless Godzilla, in my opinion. Now, restless can be a good thing, and what I mean by that is that they're constantly trying to keep you entertained with bigger monsters and more action. But do these movies have a long shelf life? I have to think not. While these films are entertaining in their own right, the lacking element in all of these movies is their memorable nature. Don't get me wrong, I heard it said that if it weren't for these movies, we wouldn't have a -1 or other recent Godzilla films, simply because these films revitalize the interest in Godzilla. If you just want to go to the theater to watch giant monsters and relentless action sequences and leave feeling a little entertained, then these movies will give you just that. Not gonna lie though, these recent MonsterVerse films are so fun to watch on the big screen. I'm actually looking forward to the upcoming Godzilla Kong movie, with the caveat that I will be going into the theater with no expectations. It's refreshing to see, though, that Yamazaki and other Godzilla film directors appreciate each other's work and are not afraid to say so. Back to Toho Godzilla films. I feel like I couldn't complete this video without talking about one of the most amazing and unexpected Godzilla viewing experiences I've had. That was with Toho's 2016 Shin Godzilla. This movie was so outside the box of typical monster movies that it easily is one that I can say will be living in my top 100 movies list.
I think the one thing I'm just curious about is the fact that since Godzilla versus Kong, Kingdom, and 2014 are so different films, and obviously they were written by different directors, and then obviously Kong Skull Island isn't brought up because it's a Kong film, but those films are so different from each other. Like, I don't know like what he's trying to say where it's like the ramping up of villains, because I guess like you could say Mechagodzilla is the ramp up from King Ghidorah, since you needed Godzilla and Kong to fight it, but then the Godzilla versus Kong story goes less from like the world's coming to an end and more a pissing contest between Godzilla and Kong. So in terms of stakes, it's not as intense as King of the Monsters, and I guess you could technically say with the inclusion of Mechagodzilla, the stakes are higher, but considering how Mechagodzilla is defeated, I wouldn't really say that like you're just always getting bigger and badder. And then 2014 is so different from those films and how it portrays Godzilla and what it says, that I think at least he's selling the movies a little bit too short. And I guess where it concerns the like other Godzilla films, yeah, their films are definitely underrated, but at least community wise, discussion wise, they're still talked about. Like I can name Godzilla films that people don't really bring up in conversation as much, but I can't really say that there are Godzilla films that are forgotten. At least even like maybe in like the general pop culture sense, there's going to be Godzilla movies people forget, and there's Godzilla movies that people are going to remember for good or bad reasons. Like no one, I think, is ever going to forget Godzilla versus Megalon because of what Godzilla versus Megalon's been used for when it comes to the discussion of Godzilla. So there's that. Like there's a lot of issues with Megalon, but I think that because Megalon has been used as the we put up with Megalon, therefore we can get silly, stupid stuff in other Godzilla movies. And I think due to that is why Megalon's not going to get forgotten, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's like remembered in the way I think he's intending this to mean.
I want to do a 3 versus 3 comparison with these 6 films, focusing on these 3 areas: budget, global revenue, and overall star rating on Letterboxd. Now, take what you will with this comparison. These are merely observations that I have made on each of these movies. You can view my 1 through 6 comparison on these films in the comments below, and let me know your thoughts on this comparison and your personal ranking of these 6 Godzilla movies. I want to leave you with one question, and that is, which one of these films do you see people talking about 70 years from now? Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe.
I guess like the question is like in 70 years, what are we going to be talking about? And where's Godzilla going to be from here? Because like, I guess we're not gonna. I doubt would see the MonsterVerse continue in 70 years. I think maybe like at most maybe a decade and a half or so is what I think could probably occur from the MonsterVerse. But it does make you wonder, like, is the MonsterVerse can be remembered because of its highs and lows, of like how much it jumped in terms of its tonality. At least like right now, what we can say is that the big issue that's coming with the MonsterVerse right now is like the big fighting issue right now is tone. Let's go with that. At the time of 2014, the big running issue was screen time and characters. That was the big issue there. And then with King of the Monsters into GVK, I would definitely say that like issues with the writing and the human characters were the big issues from Kingdom into Godzilla versus Kong. Say what you will about the writing in King of the Monsters. So I think the question he's posing is too broad. I mean, we remember Godzilla 54 for many things. He was to say that we're not going to remember the MonsterVerse for other things too. Like we still talk about like 98, for example, and like the problems with 98. I think that obviously because the video is only like 5 minutes and clearly he's already wrapping up. I think that like the questions he's asking are so general, and he's not a Godzilla fan, and this isn't his wheelhouse. So I think he just didn't have much to say, and just I'm not saying he's grifting, but I think that like the topic that he's proposing is because of the success that -1 got, rather than what it is that can be actually said about like the quality or themes of these movies.
But for more deep dives into the world of cinema, and I will see you guys in the next one.
And yeah, essentially the rest of this, we'll just skim through this because all of this is just really, or yeah, it's like it's all the quotes from like the Bible about Leviathan. Which I mean, hey, something interesting you can do is pull on stuff from the Bible to do something interesting in Godzilla. But just going into his channel real quick, for people to understand what I mean, is like obviously first thing like Godzilla, new thing he's been doing, and then not too many other like not a lot of other videos. And as you see, there's nothing. It's not really anything having to do with like genre films or kaiju films or anything like that. Like I think because we just got -1 and now we're getting GXK, it seems like that was the reason why he wanted to talk about it. But MonsterVerse always remember for bringing back Godzilla, making it more of a global franchise. I think bringing Godzilla back, sure. I think Shin probably did a better job of that because like the success that it had. But you can also say that's like due to the success of the MonsterVerse coming on. So there is that. And I just realized I don't have the banner on. So share screen again, and we can get on in just seconds. But I understand where a lot of people, I hate using the word grifter. It's so vapid. It means essentially nothing, honestly. To most people who use it. But like I think it has less to do with grifter, more just jumping on the opportunity because you don't really have much else to say in relation to a topic. And I think that because a lot of people have seen -1 and now are seeing GXK coming out, that like they want to give their obviously the next MonsterVerse movie. There's such a tonal difference. There's that. You're going to read in a reverse. But I don't know. It's weird. But let's get the next one going, shall we? And at least this one I found interesting because I remember I'd seen this guy's channel, Accented Cinema, and he has like his issues with Shin Godzilla, so that's why I wanted to do the next one here. And let's remove the ad if the ad does pop up. Yep. No sound on this. No, sir. Nope. Why did it go to that one again? I love YouTube sometimes. I love it. There we go. And I think I'm going to do the same thing. Just keep it at 2x speed. Oh, no, just for you guys. I'll keep it on 1.5 so you guys can understand what he's saying, because I know it's kind of tizzing me if I put it on like 2x speed.
By movie. We all know the cliche that art teachers really hate it when you draw anime. But why? Is it because anime is too popular? Are art teachers all complete snobs? I want you to keep that question in mind, and we'll come back to it at the end. For now, let's talk about Godzilla. In a way, my reaction to American Godzilla is like an art teacher's reaction to anime drawings. I acknowledge its quality, I enjoy its authenticity, in fact, I'm having blast. Yet, the critic inside me is like a harsh teacher. I know it can do better, but it is not. This feeling has only been intensified when Godzilla -1 rose to challenge the world. It's like I'm seeing a particularly talented individual led astray by a very fundamental mistake, a basic decision that made Hollywood incapable of creating something that can rival -1 or Shin or the original. And I don't like that feeling. I'm not saying that because I'm a weeb, I am, but that's neither here nor there. I say this because American Godzilla is about Godzilla, but Japanese Godzilla is about life. What is Shin Godzilla about? From the nuclear hit to the hazmat suit, the earthquake and the tsunami, it doesn't take much for anyone to realize that this film is a metaphor for the Fukushima nuclear disaster. Indeed, facing the devastation caused by Godzilla, the film sharply satirizes political incompetence. It examines the unequal US and Japan relationship. It makes fun of the masses for not taking an emergency seriously. All of these details mirror real-world events. Shin Godzilla is a deeply political movie. But Shin Godzilla is hardly the only one. The OG Godzilla is often mistakenly interpreted as a film about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. While it certainly drew inspiration from that, the film had a much more pointed purpose. Godzilla came out in 1954, back when the US was conducting nuclear tests on Bikini Atoll. The location is closer to Japan than it is to US mainland. It was as if the US was flexing its reach. Tragedy struck on March 1st, 1954, when a Japanese fishing boat was exposed to nuclear fallout due to one of the bomb tests. The resulting radiation burn is too graphic to be shown on YouTube. One fisherman would die during the treatment for acute radiation syndrome. This event shocked the nation of Japan. The opening scene of Godzilla emerging from the sea and attacking a fishing vessel is a direct reference to this real-life event. Godzilla would proceed to island hop before invading Japan mainland, a la Operation Downfall. Godzilla isn't just a film about the terror of nuclear weapons. It was a protest against the US.
Let me pause. There we go. I just want to go back to what he says here.
Godzilla would proceed to island hop before invading Japan.
Godzilla doesn't island hop the movie. Like, I understand, like, a lot of people, when they really want to, like, push the idea that Godzilla is supposed to be, like, a representation of specifically America, that they try to, like, say, oh, this could be a reference to, like, Godzilla is, like, was on an island, now moving towards Japan and attacking boats. It's like how the US was island hopping. That was not the case at all. And I honestly, I haven't heard a lot of people say specifically Godzilla is just Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Of course, like, with the fact that Japan had dealt with 2 nuclear bombs, the idea that not only like the Lucky Dragon number 5 incident happening, but the fact that the US was testing more bombs meant that, yes, there was obviously the trauma of those events happening, but the fact that it could happen again is why Godzilla was so poignant. But I think that, like, it's really annoying when people will pose a statement about a group of people or like an analysis without, like, at least doing the due diligence of presenting people directly saying this instead of trying to, like, make up a generalized sentiment, which I probably have done in the past as well. And I try to do better by at least finding direct quotes of people saying things so that I can point to this at least being the case instead of trying to make up a generalized statement and then elaborating from there, like, my own opinions on things. But yeah.
England, a la Operation Downfall. Godzilla isn't just a film about the terror of nuclear weapons. It was a protest against the US.
How is it you want to elaborate on that?
This is the purposeful nature
of No, it wasn't. And it's really weird that it was a protest about the US. These protesters were so, like, staunch in their beliefs that they decided they're going to give it to American distributors and let them do whatever they wanted to it. And for so many people who consider the American version of the film bastardized, they really bastardized the protest against the US, unless we're trying to say that, like, people they were giving it to were so media illiterate that they couldn't realize they were being made fun of and protested against. But yeah, that leaves that topic hanging.
Good Godzilla films. In Giant Monsters All Out Attack, the highest grossing film of the Millennium series, Godzilla is interpreted as a supernatural monster born from the rage of fallen World War II soldiers. The film minimizes the nuclear angle. After all, the Cold War has ended. Instead, it examines Japan's spirit in the post-war era. It urges Japan to move on from the shadow of its blood-soaked past. This entry...
It's really funny that he talks about Godzilla 54 being a protest against the US, but very quickly glazes over the fact that GMK Godzilla is made up of the souls of World War II soldiers. Doesn't really doesn't specify who exactly, and just sort of says, oh, it's about Japan moving from its blood-soaked past, without really saying, like, oh yeah, Japan kind of did a lot of bad things during the war, and there's a lot of issues surrounding that in Japan, and that is why the film wanted to address those topics. And, like, obviously Norman England's done, like, a book, like, Behind the Kaiju Curtain, and there's a whole segment that has interviews relating to GMK, and I think that like, yeah, buy that book. It's not super expensive, and I think that people be far more informed on these things. And considering the fact that like one of the Millennium films are so much more earlier, like not earlier, but they're so much more new, and the people who are making them are still like all alive. Like finding people at least interview them and hearing their direct thoughts instead of trying to present like your own ideas or like these generalized statements on things would do like you wonders for these things. Especially like again, the Millennium series is not that old, guys. It really isn't. What happened? Was it a protest of the bomb test in China? It's not just US videos. Yeah, it's super weird. And now it's going black.
Would indirectly inspire Godzilla -1, a film that took all of the previously
Clarify, GMK had influenced Godzilla -1. I had forgotten the concept of GMK, but when I wrote this script as if it was my own idea, I only found myself under considerable influence. You know, yeah, this is a really good point because -1 tackles the fact that, yeah, Japan did not really value the lives of its soldiers too much and also made them do terrible things. And that is why the fight against Godzilla, a distinct, like, negative force, and that's not even a stand in for any nation. And the idea of them just fighting to survive and fighting, like, to do something good is so resonant with people around the world. And also why the Godzilla 54 book review is being written right now. Not written right now. It's being edited right now by a friend of mine. And there's a quote in the book that I'm not going to spoil. I'll leave that for the video. But it specifically talks about like Japan in World War II and what finding like the essence of Godzilla could do to help make up for things happening during the war. Like the idea that Godzilla 54 was a protest against America is blindingly stupid, straight up.
mentioned elements and push it even further. At its highest height, Godzilla is about war and politics. At its lowest low, Godzilla is still about pollution and even bullying.
Those are still technically, if we want to get really pedantic, those are still technically political, technically. But Norman Wingland is a windbag. No, I mean like he can come off as very abrasive, but like he still has. There's a lot of good things that he has done. Behind the Kaiju Curtain is one of them. I'm not going to speak for the man. He can speak for himself, but like a lot of things that have occurred are understandable for him to have the perspective and sort of the persona he puts on. So that's all I want to say on that. But like it's the idea says about war and politics, and when you say certain phrases in a certain way, you're gonna come across to people or like infer things. Unless like if it was not intentional at all, sure, but unless it can be proven, it comes across as if like you're pandering to like certain ideas people have, which inherently confirms the biases that other people have. Again, I don't want to name names, but it just speaks to like the fact that obviously the video is only 10 minutes or 11 minutes, not including other things, but it feels like I want to give this point and as generalized as possible, and I want to have it fill the 10 minutes to maximize on the algorithm. Of course, like I'm just am able to apply for monetization, so probably when I get to monetizations, things like that would probably be hitting me more and I'd be thinking about it more. But I think that if we're going to have like these video essays, then giving the time that you need to really expound upon these points is important. Oh, you're covering that video. I've seen it. Don't agree with. Yeah, I'm not sure which one you're talking about, but you're talking about this one so far. It's stupid. And he's had his video on Shin Godzilla. I'll probably do that another time, but I'd want to watch Shin Godzilla again before I look at that
Godzilla is
video.
about war and politics. At its lowest low, Godzilla is still about pollution and even bullying. Godzilla's ability to transform into topical issues is why this kaiju remains relevant 70 years later. To this day, this giant monster urges Japan to examine and re-examine itself. This is the soul of Godzilla. Of course,
I guess that's fair. I wouldn't say that Godzilla is always allowed Japan to re-examine itself. The one thing that could be said about Godzilla having such annualized sequels was the fact that you were able to see a lot of things put into the films that helped you understand where Japan was at certain periods. And I think for people who wanted to learn more about Japan, it really helped you understand certain things, or even want to learn more about um, things going on in Japan. Like, totally unrelated, I guess, but when it came to like the late 90s, when this Heisei series was ending, and specifically one of my favorite anime, Shinro, was coming out at the time, I would have loved to have seen like an anime Godzilla movie talking about like things that Mamoru was talking about, but obviously those topics were more related to like his youth and stuff. But like, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in Japan that Godzilla tackles that obviously we as Westerners do not understand as well, but I find them at least interesting to the point where it gives you a small gateway in to be like, oh, what's this topic? And then you go down a rabbit hole. And that's one of the things I love about learning, is that when you go down like self-exploration with rabbit holes, you can come on some interesting topics, and then that's when you can examine other forms of literature and things of that sort.
First, Japan is no stranger to anti-war films. As an example, Shohei Inamura's Black Rain is a brutal look at the horrific aftermath of Hiroshima. It's a perfect companion film to go along with Oppenheimer or Godzilla -1. Yasuzo Masumura's Red Angel is a much more controversial but thought-provoking look at the dehumanizing nature of war, examined from the perspective of a nurse at the front line. If you want to see these films for yourself, may I recommend Mubi? In fact, Mubi is how I found Red Angel in the first place. Mubi is a streaming platform dedicated.
I think like overall streaming like I have issues with streaming and digital media as a whole, but I do like a lot of these services that can provide things that you probably wouldn't have seen because like your inability to get them. Speaking of Genro, like for a while, like unless like I checked Amazon, I wasn't able to find Blu-ray, but I only recently got like a Blu-ray not too long ago. So like it is things like this where you can watch it through a subscription, and then I say buy a physical media.
To elevating films from around the world. With a diverse curated catalog, I find Mubi to be a perfect place to browse, learn, and watch new films. Right now, from Canada, if I want to see a classic, I can put on The Black Report. And if I want something more badass, I can put on a Beat Takashi movie. You may know him as the dude from Ghost in the Shell. I know him as the dude who calls Devilman a piece of trash on an award show. If you also want to check it out, or bathe in the glory of Beat Takashi, you can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/cinema. That's MUBI. Try today and explore. Let's not pretend Godzilla is always this classy. While this series has enormous highs, most of the time Godzilla remains a cheesy tokusatsu featuring people in rubber suits. This is especially the case during the Showa era, when Godzilla had its first and longest running series, totaling 15 films, released almost annually. Towards the end, it had run out of steam, the films became episodic, and the monsters started to act like wrestlers. To a fan,
well, it's because obviously diminishing returns, and therefore the series wanted to cater towards the demographic that was continually coming out for these movies. And obviously, since kids became the highest demographic, therefore things like writing became less important and the spectacle became more relevant. And that's why the writing is not as good, but you saw the spectacle, which was in keeping for the like films at the time. Like, this is super controversial, but I guess like definitely not writing wise they're the same, but came out around the same time. Like the Godzilla suits and like how well the effects kept up in terms of the budgets that they were under. Like these suits and like what you could do in them without like completely messing them up was a lot better than like the shark from Jaws. Like the only reason why Jaws is the way it is, like to a large degree, is because of the fact that the animatronic didn't look good and didn't work well. So because of that, they had to work around it, which is one of the reasons why restrictions aren't always like a bad thing. There can be good things that come out of restrictions, and Jaws is one of them. But like if you look at how the shark behaves when you see it versus like how like these suits can hold up under so much abuse in these films, like I would probably say that like these films do things better. Super controversial take, but like you can say that Godzilla acts like a wrestler and it's not realistic, but like if you buy into it, then yes, Godzilla is fine the way he is. Versus like if you buy into what Godzilla is, then Godzilla is far more realistic than a shark from Jaws, because the shark from Jaws in a lot of scenes doesn't really act like a real shark. And I'm not talking about behavior, just how it moves. may want to check if your Warner Brothers movies have rotted. I have, and they have not, thankfully.
These much sillier iterations are every bit as Godzilla as the best ones. This is where Hollywood Godzilla draws its inspiration from. From Godzilla's rivalry with King Ghidorah, to Dr. Serizawa blowing himself up near Godzilla, to Mothra always coming in pairs but only one of them ever gets action because of...
Well, there wasn't a second Mothra in King of the Monsters, but okay, and there wasn't a second Mothra in that one either. Like, the thing that annoys me, again, always with these videos, is that when you get small details wrong to, like, make a funny point, and... like, it doesn't make sense because there was not a second Mothra in King of the Monsters, and it wasn't until Mothra versus Godzilla when you got the twin Mothras, because there was only one Mothra in the first Mothra movie. And then of course, the rivalry with King Ghidorah really didn't start at Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. It started afterwards, but
budgetary reasons, by most metrics, the American series is remarkably faithful. You can tell these films are made by Godzilla fans, wrestling fans. That's right, let me ask this question again. What is the American Godzilla series about? Kong and Godzilla team up to fight against the sudden intrusion of Mechagodzilla. It is hype as if you are familiar with Mechagodzilla in the first place. It's as if Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage were having an epic battle when suddenly Andre the Giant shows up and forcing the two to form a temporary alliance. It sounds awesome to wrestling fans. To me, Hollywood...
I've heard similar things when it comes to people who are big wrestling fans, that like the more soapboxy aspects of wrestling has kind of ruined the spectacle for them. But I am not a huge wrestling fan, so I can't really comment on that. It's just those are things I've simply heard.
Godzilla is functionally a series about another series. They are dream matches between beloved characters. They are high-budget fan films.
I think the only reason why I'm saying this is because it's America. America dropped bombs in Japan, so therefore it's people talking about something that isn't there, so therefore it's fan films. I think that's stupid. And again, this is me trying to like infer what he's saying, but like these films are about like what some of the Showa films were, like the later Showa films are, where you have a setting, monsters exist, and the monsters do things. And I would say even then the Showa films kind of say things and are more of their times than the Hollywood films are, I would say. Like there's there's more aesthetics plus sensibilities I can get from the later Showa films, the Heisei films, even the Millennium films, than I can from really any of the 2014 MonsterVerse films, because there's no zeitgeist really to capture in the MonsterVerse stuff. But yes, neither here nor there.
Though it is no pale imitation, it is still just an imitation. Indeed, the American series rarely, if ever, tackles real-life issues. The best it ever does is a condemnation of eco-terrorism, an inoffensive position against a non-issue. That's why I love...
Well, I mean, it wasn't specifically about eco-terrorism, it was about climate change and stuff, which, again, definitely a topic, but neither here nor there. But, again, I think that's an unfair characterization.
These films, they are never more than simple guilty pleasures. American Godzilla has the form, but lacks the soul. When Charlie Chaplin was making The Great Dictator, a movie that satirizes and condemns Nazism, it was met with pushback. According to his autobiography, he was warned by United Artists regarding censorship.
So halfway through making Great Dictator receiving, I mentioned that would run into censorship troubles. Also, the English was very concerned about an anti-Hitler picture and doubted whether it could be shown in Britain. Must be like.
And the film may not be shown in the UK, which was not at war yet. Remember, the extent of the horrors in Nazi Germany was not widely known in 1939. What Chaplin did was controversial. It was a deeply political movie that ruffled a lot of feathers. When the film came out, however, it was received with wide acclaim. Making fun of Nazis became the American way of life. This is why it always grinds my gears when people say that...
I think Charlie Chaplin's a British actor, but I want to hear what he says after this. But
they want politics to stay out movies and games. The most powerful and enduring art in history are often political.
Yes, but that doesn't mean you get an excuse to preach to people and then like condemn large portions of your audience, which a lot of modern art does, because they understand that there's a divide between fans. So therefore, whatever the politics of the people making these art is, they will ultimately create art in a IP specifically to cater to the arts that, and not the art, but cater to the ideas of the creators and specifically pander it to the fans who like this sort of stuff. And these people don't really make it a secret. So you can like make this general statement. I don't like it when people say I don't want art or politics in their video games. No, they just don't want to be preached at. And they understand that these people know you exist and are specifically making art in a way to ruffle your feathers. And like considering where political discourse has gone, it makes sense why people don't really want to have a lot of their media specifically being political or trying to push a political message. People like a lot of good art if it's well written and it's well constructed and it's just like talking about a topic that is not relevant to the zeitgeist, just want to be entertained.
Picasso's Guernica, Beethoven's Symphony No. 3, Fritz Lang's Metropolis, Rage Against the Machine, Hollywood.
It's really funny that he brings up Rage Against the Machine when so much of what Rage Against the Machine talks about nowadays is just agreeing with the establishment rather than against the establishment, which is what they were known for. Yeah, love how the times change, but
has done this before. Predator, Aliens, Rambo, these beloved mainstream action movies were products of Americans' reflection on the Vietnam War. RoboCop, set in corporate-controlled Detroit, satirizes the inhumanity of unchecked capitalism. They Live by John Carpenter condemns consumerism and wealth inequality. These movies were about people's lives. They were examination of our world. They are classics. Yet, when it comes to Godzilla, all we get is, oh, giant monsters are cool. That's something that's been
it's probably because it was a precedent set by the Toho films, and people just want escapism, and they like Godzilla because it's an escapist film. Like, I understand we want Godzilla films to be more. I think the issue is that if you're going to make a film with Godzilla having to do with escapism, then at least just have it be well made. I don't think people have a problem with that.
lacking in recent Hollywood movies. Studios are so afraid to upset a politically divided audience that blockbusters have no bites. Somehow, reality itself has
I just want to pull back to that real quick.
so afraid to upset a politically divided audience that blockbusters have no bites.
And you don't like this doesn't include the fact that the system is set up in a way to where, yes, if something does have a bite, then that does cut into sales, which, yes, if it shows that like certain movies with certain ideas don't do as well as you'd expect them to, then that does say something and people do pick up on that, or people have other ideas in blockbusters and it can blacklist them. Not necessarily a quote unquote political film, but, and again, I pay this because I don't have specific quotes brought up, but if I recall correctly, a lot of people who worked on Passion of the Christ got blacklisted because they worked on Passion of the Christ. Not necessarily a quote unquote political film for the modern day, but it does say something that that Hollywood as it is now doesn't necessarily facilitate films to have a bite, because either if the bite doesn't land, then therefore it shows that they don't have a, like, Hollywood in itself doesn't have a bite. And if it does have a bite and upsets the wrong people, then therefore they're not going to be able to bite again. So, this statement just comes across as so vapid.
Somehow, reality itself has become a controversial topic, so much so that our movies don't even want to talk about it. Until America has the guts to see itself in the mirror and examine itself, Hollywood Godzilla.
It's really funny that he brings up Morbius, and there's a lot you could talk about in terms of like making a film with Morbius in it that means something. But talking about like Hollywood examining itself, but then talking about Morbius, it's so stupid.
Will never be a classic. Remember the question at the beginning of the video? Now you know the answer. If your anime style is copied from someone else's, you will always be an imitation. But if you can derive an anime style from real life, then you become a master. The same applies to Godzilla. To realize the series' full potential, we have to look to the real world. So here is an idea. What if Godzilla represents Nazism? Once a significant force in the US in the 1930s, it was defeated, but then regrew and begins terrorizing the modern-day US. What if Godzilla represents the American foreign policy in the Middle East, a monster of America's own making? What if Godzilla represents the COVID pandemic? It marches from China towards the US, causing a disaster made worse by denialism. Is it cringe?
Yes, it is cringe, only because of the fact that literally you gloss over what GMK is about, but then are hyper-specific about these ideas for an American Godzilla movie. And then you also don't really talk about like what led up to the events in World War II and like why Japan ended up the way it is. Again, not justifying what happened to the Japanese people in no way, shape, or form, but it's really funny that you do this, but don't do like you do this for like what an American Godzilla could be, quote unquote, but you don't do this for the Japanese Godzilla films that were done, and there is a lot of information you could pull on to talk about.
Does it make you uncomfortable? Are you strong enough to think about the hard questions in life?
It's not the fact that it's cringe, it's the fact that that's such a stupid point you're making. But yes, you heard that right. A Godzilla movie about Nazis. Yeah, totally. I hope I don't get screwed over out of my soon-to-be monetization because of things like that. Question, how do you feel writers should handle power scaling in a story? I am not familiar with Kamen Rider, unfortunately. It's not my wheelhouse. Speaking with no experience in the writer fandom and only having seen parts of Amazon's, parts of Black Sun, all of Shin Kamen Rider, not the new Shin Kamen Rider by Ano, the original Shin Kamen Rider, and then seeing parts of that one by Ano. At least from what I like, if you're asking within the story itself, since you're saying in a story, I guess like there should like the like Kamen Rider should mean like doing things like one attack and destroy the whole world. Like I think that Kamen Rider works very well as a uniquely Japanese street level story. Kind of like a Punisher Daredevil, but more powerful. I think that's what I like about the appeal of like darker Kamen Rider stories. But again, I'm not super familiar with Kamen Rider. I'm trying to. I don't have the time, all the time in the world, unfortunately. And I realized that I was like, oh, I don't want to be alone today. So I asked for a second person on. And that person is the one, the only, the wonderful Vic. Say hello.
Hey, what's up?
The ceiling. That's what's up. And if you guys don't know, obviously, you can see right there Vic's got a channel, so subscribe to him. He's a good man. We like here.
Thank you.
But we will go on to the next one, the next video, and I think it's the D-Man video, I believe. So yeah, it's the D-Man video. So upwards and onwards we go. And like I said, this has nothing to do with.
Just want to take a moment.
No, not you. I don't want to hear anything you have to say. Of course, that's the ad that pops up after that video. But yeah, we will go into the D-Man video, which I at least, again, there's nothing bad that happened to D-Man. It's just interesting information. So we begin. Oh, it's doing. I have to press play because I was on the audio.
What's up, everybody? D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're going to be doing another Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire news roundup. That's right. In this one, we will be continuing our chronological journey through the development of the MonsterVerse by talking about events that happened in March 2023.
Nuclear Pulse, Axe, Kong, Scott King. Yes.
There's so much freaking drama in this video. I'm interested to see how people are going to feel about this one, so let's jump into it. Starting out, the Asylum. Earth's greatest movie company is releasing Ape vs. Mecha Ape because obviously they didn't know that Godzilla vs. Kong was going to try and...
Vic, you do know that Ape vs. Mecha Ape is going to be the pop culture phenomenon of the century, correct?
Most definitely.
I mean, it does say that shit is bananas, so very clearly it objectively, I'm saying the word, objectively is going to be like the best film of this year.
No doubt.
Like Alice said in the comments, Joseph Biden the movie. The Biden-saurus, to steal a meme from another channel. Yeah, play.
Throwing a robot in there just to steal the magic away from Ape vs. Monster, Earth's greatest movie. That was so rude of Godzilla vs. Kong to do, but you know what? It's better this way because Ape vs. Monster took its time. Ape vs. Mecha Ape is its own dedicated standalone movie to that premise where it doesn't have to have a giant monster distracting from the premise of an ape fighting a giant mech. You can just get to the juice that people want. Ape vs. Mecha Ape.
That's true.
Poster and it looks incredible. Mecha Ape's awesome. Obviously, kind of like a Mechanicon, but for the modern age, which is what we've all been needing. Ape vs. Mecha Ape then released its DVD poster, and then Ape vs. Mecha Ape released its trailer. And I gotta be honest, Mecha Ape seems like a lot to handle. And I have not watched the movie yet.
I mean, he's got the Mecha Ape's got a Gatling gun, so you gotta give it to him.
more pain after the pain he was put through when he had to fight monsters. It's just not fair. I don't want to see Abraham in any more pain. He saved Washington, D.C., which is something we all hope will happen if a monster comes for it in real life as well. He's a hero, an American hero, and a patriot, and I will not stand for it. Aya has a Godzilla 2019 re-release, but it's actually an updated version. It's not a straight up re-release. It's an updated version taking in some criticism people had about the original.
Vic, do you have any of the Haya toys or no?
None of the Godzilla ones. I only have one Haya figure at all, and it's an alien figure.
Okay.
One of the basic ones.
Do you have like any of the NECA alien figures for like reference?
I'm sure I had some growing up, and maybe like a few recent ones, but nothing on me right now.
Yeah, so like I don't have any of the Haya figures. I was probably maybe gonna get the Haya -1, but someone actually ended up buying me the the -1 monster arts. So I never ended up buying the Haya -1 pre-order. So I think like maybe I might just to see kind of how the Hayas are. I've seen them in person. They just look super kind of glossy. Like they look like early NECA figures, but they have like a lot of articulation, like a MonsterVerse figure. So I don't know. And again, I don't really do toy reviews at all anymore. So
original release. This stands at 7 inches and is an articulated figure. It is redesigned in the neck and mouth area and runs you $49.99, which was the same price as the original. This wasn't a replacement for the original. It didn't like undo the original. They just heard that people had some complaints, and so when they re-released the figure, they made adjustments for it. They then announced their Haya Heat Ray Godzilla 2021 using, I think, the same sculpt here, just with a different paint job. I don't know how they differentiate between 2019 and 2021. I think this could be the secret reason they wanted to do this re-release, because this features an upgraded neck and head, and again, will run you $50 if you can get it without shipping, that is. I have some promo images from Spiral Studios Mothra 2019. This
speaking of Spiral, Vic, are you gonna get the Spiral Studios Zilla figure?
I have not gotten my hands on it, and I think it's gonna be something that's pretty expensive for me.
Well, actually, he explains it here about the Spiral figures. We'll listen to it in just a sec.
Is a magnificent model. Spiral Studios is such a high quality brand. These things are incredible. It's blacklight accessible. If you blacklight it, it'll have this cool color scheme to it, kind of representing Mothra's bioluminescence in the movie. I love the creative way they've gotten Mothra to fly as well with the flame. This thing runs you $1,999 and can be paid with installments over time.
Yeah, so like you can pay for that Zilla figure with installments. So for people who are unfamiliar with the installments, it means like you pay a certain amount over time to pay off the figure. So if, let's say, Vic, that you got the figure but you just had to pay installments on it, would you buy the Zilla figure that way?
Perhaps, like if I ever found the extra cash for it, because I know you have to I don't know, I've only gone based on referencing other stuff that I've seen installments for. Like you need to pay like a pretty, like maybe half or just less than half of a portion of it.
Yeah, so like if you're paying for like an installment, like if you're saying that, it's like you're probably paying like 500 for like the Zilla figure, it's like 1,000.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Like I love the figures, and I think Spiral was a company that was at G-Fest, because I actually got to see the Zilla figure in person. So like they're big figures. And like they could literally just be like giant garden gnomes essentially, but obviously they're not built as garden gnomes, but they are investments for sure.
Yeah.
Spiral Studios' Ultimate Masterline Mothra 2019 Amago Mystical version was revealed through this poster. What a beautiful poster with beautiful art of such a beautiful Mothra. I love me the King of the Monsters Mothra. I just think it's so fantastic. The Spiral Studios Mothra 2019 Mystical version is actually pretty much the same as the original. It's very similar. It's also blacklight accessible. I struggled to find the difference here. This one runs $2,049, and the only difference I can really tell is that this one has LED capabilities, glowing the flames and also making Mothra glow blue, and that looks very beautiful. Getting into some juicy behind-the-scenes drama on some stuff we have all been wondering about for a long time, we're going to talk about Akira Takarada's cut cameo from Godzilla 2014. Of course, Takarada was the actor who played Ogata in the original Godzilla from 1954, and then starred in many Godzilla films over the years since then. Takarada was supposed to have a return to the Godzilla franchise in 2014, but he was cut from the movie for some reason. This is a really tricky, complicated situation for me to discuss. I think quite a bit about it. I've been able to piece together quite a bit because I know a lot of these key players, and so I've learned a lot. But the last time I led like a campaign, #release the Takarada cut, which is something I was tweeting like once a day, every day, until hopefully it got some traction, and it did start to get traction. Some people reached out to me and were basically like, hey man, if you ever want to be involved in anything more than just your silly little YouTube channel, you'll knock that off.
I think it's funny how he characterizes this way. I don't know specifically what he said, like what was said to him, but like it's interesting to note that like someone actually reached out to him and was like, cut it out, because like either they were getting some actual pushback and something occurred for them to have said that, because they wouldn't have reached out to him if it got no traction and no one said anything. But Yeah. Neither
Yeah.
here nor there, but like
I
it
guess
does.
it's just because of like
Yeah.
the connections D-Man has.
Yeah, no, he has connections. He's a well-connected
Uh-huh.
fellow. He is the John Wick of the Godzilla fandom in the sense where he knows people who know people, circles within circles, that type of stuff. But I guess it's like one of those fan things where it's like fans make YouTube channels, fans say things, and then like people who have connections are like, yeah, you person with your silly little stuff, you don't do that because you're making waves and stuff. But obviously people's jobs, all that, whole other topic, but it's a fun topic.
And so I kind of had to. But KDM revealed some interesting details, stating that he interviewed Akira Takarada, Tetsuya Takarada, and Tim Bean, Takarada's manager and personal friend. And that interview was supposed to come out sometime this year in 2024, with the full truth behind the cameo, BTS drama, Gareth Edwards' emails to Takarada, and then to prove that he meant business, KDM released this photo of Akira Takarada. This was taken on set in Vancouver on March 18th, 2013, over 10 years ago at this point, and it was on the first day of shooting Godzilla 2014 in Vancouver at the Vancouver Convention Center. Takarada played a customs agent inspecting an open passport, and then he stamps the passport, welcoming Ford to Japan, stating, "Thank you, Mr. Brody. Welcome to Japan." We'll wait to see what KDM's full scoop finally reveals when he's finally able to release this thing, probably to celebrate 10 years of Godzilla 2014 and re-stir some of this to hopefully get that cameo released. I don't think we will ever see it. As I understand it, and I could be wrong, as I said, I'm kind of putting together puzzle pieces here, so maybe they don't fit together perfectly. Akira Takarada's cameo was basically brought about because Tim Bean was a Godzilla superfan and led a very successful campaign to get Takarada his cameo, following Takarada verbally stating that it's his dreams and desires to have a cameo in the 2014 movie at G-Fest. It worked. Gareth Edwards saw, and so eventually they got Takarada his cameo. But basically, it kind of sounds like producer Thomas Toll, stepped in and wanted the scene cut for runtime reasons. Takarada got upset about it, and so there was some headbutting. Some other people tried to get involved to try and cool things and get the cameo put back in the movie. And essentially, it kind of sounds like Thomas Toll kind of got in a pissing match with Takarada, cutting him out of the movie because he's kind of an asshole. And so goodbye Takarada. We're never really going to see that scene, I don't think, because as I understand it, if they do release it, they'll have to... What's up, everybody?
Oh, why did it go back to the beginning? No. Oh, that was so weird. I'm getting another ad too. Oh, there's the popcorn box that everyone's been talking about. And flamethrowers. We gotta love that. Like I understand. At least this is a good place to pause. And D-Man, Derek, you're still talking. Stop. I guess it makes sense that the producer would want like runtime to be cut down, but still, I mean, like if you're making a film like Godzilla and you have an original like actor in there, like how much of a bottom line are you losing from excluding something that's gonna make the people who are gonna want to see his film be like, yo, that's so cool? Because there's gonna be fans who are like, that's so cool. Bring other people and be like, yo, that person right there who's just a custom agent, he was in the original Godzilla, and you're gonna get more people into it, more people are gonna watch it. Like checks and balances, there's a trade-off for everything, and I think that like that was the wrong call.
Yeah, plus I think there are also other things in the film that could have been cut that weren't like overall necessary.
Basically, that sounds like producer Thomas Toll, stepped in and wanted the scene cut for runtime reasons. Takarada got upset about it, and so there was some headbutting. Some other people tried to get involved to try and cool things and get the cameo put back in the movie. And essentially, it kind of sounds like Thomas Toll kind of got in a pissing match with Takarada, cutting him out of the movie because he's kind of an asshole. And so goodbye Takarada. We're never really going to see that scene, I don't think, because as I understand it, if they do release it, they'll have to pay a Toho salary to Takarada because he was a Toho actor, and so there's some contractual thing there where he had to be paid a little bit more. It's a similar reason to why we're probably never going to see a lot of that cut footage from Godzilla vs. Kong, starring with Ziyi Yang and a lot of those characters, is because once they release footage of a character who has been cut entirely out of a movie, they have to pay that person a bonus wage for the work they did. And it sounds like they don't want to do that. We're probably never going to see that Takarada scene, and it kind of sounds like that scene has been locked behind a blast door where it's going to be really hard to get at. I found some Godzilla King of the Monsters.
I think it's annoying too, where it's like art's so important, art's so great. We want to make art a business, but then we don't want to pay people for their time working on this stuff. Just further problems with the industry, but
interviews I'd never seen before, so I wanted to discuss those. These were reshared by people like Toho Kingdom around this time, and in the first one with Ken Watanabe from Godzilla King of the Monsters, he states that he was impressed to see the size and scale of Godzilla. Now, I'm not sure if he was talking about the movie or the Cinerama Dome, which he's standing in front of, but he says, I want to buy it. I don't really know what it is. Is it the movie or is it the Godzilla head? He says he might not because he's turning into a bit of a Godzilla side person, and so he's decided to take a break from Godzilla for a while following this movie. He says he was excited for the 2014 film to release, but there was a lot of skepticism, especially from fans, on if it would turn out all right. But for King of the Monsters, it feels a bit more like an anticipated movie, and it feels like it'll meet people's expectations because it's a classic Godzilla versus King Ghidorah style movie. There's another interview starring
butchering of Ken Watanabe's characters. Another thing that I'll have to do in the future, but
the director of Godzilla King of the Monsters, Michael Dougherty, and also Ken Watanabe. This is another Japanese interview. In it starts out with this goofy Ghidorah impression from Watanabe, where Watanabe says that Ghidorah is his favorite, but as a kid, he really loved the superheroes. Dougherty then says his favorite is Rodan because he's such an underdog. Watanabe says it was exciting to play the part of Serizawa because he's a leader, even though he's a scientist. Dougherty then says he would love to make kaiju real in the real world because in the movie, they represent the strength of Mother Nature. How in the film, it's supposed to represent that when mankind does bad things to the planet, nature strikes back. He says that the whole message of the movie is that we must learn to coexist with nature, otherwise Mother Nature will unleash her wrath. Dougherty confirms that in the past of the MonsterVerse, there was a society that lived in harmony with the Titans, and at some point that harmony was severed, and that history eventually became fairy tales and myths and stories, and everybody forgot what the truth was. Everybody except Godzilla.
I think the one thing that, like, I love the idea that's presented here, because obviously the idea of Godzilla being myths and legends was implemented in 2014. I just think that, like, we've strayed a lot from this idea of, like, an alternate history scenario for Godzilla and delved more into, like, this concept of Godzilla having his own, like, world building with the Titans and the giant apes now with New Empire. It makes you wonder if Braden's ever going to watch this. Like what we would have gotten if Gareth Edwards continued, or we've gotten more of Michael Dougherty's Wet Dream and stuff. But yeah,
Personally, I think a lot of that like mythical godlike element is still there.
it's still
Because-
there, but it's like, because we're gonna talk about it when it comes to the Hunted comic, because in that comic, at least they treat the Titans more like animals and they act more like animals rather than like godly figures. And it just comes from the fact that they keep bringing this idea up. It never gets explained, and therefore fans don't really have a proper understanding. It comes down to total interpretation, and because everyone interprets it in a different way, that's what causes a lot of issues. Because like understanding these stories, this is why we need interviews. But yeah.
The post-Godzilla vs. Kong world, it seems like Adam Wingard has kind of thrown a lot of those ideas out the door, but maybe they'll be kind of brought back up into new ways in Godzilla X Kong of the New Empire, given his Hollow Earth Kingdom and all that stuff. Although Godzilla's a bit more of an asshole now than he ever was before, and so I don't think that those ideas have remained intact. I guess that's kind of the problem when you have shifting creatives all of the time.
I don't think Godzilla's more of an asshole. But we'll talk about that when we get to the star of the comic. But
He's on the same page. Watanabe then speaks to the real-world parallels between Godzilla and natural disasters, and then says that the power of the MonsterVerse is taking these messages and stories and turning them from Japan's Godzilla to the world's Godzilla, and making the franchise more global in both its scale, scope, and reach, and also its thematic value. Dougherty then says he views Godzilla as a peace ambassador, bringing Japan to the United States so soon after the war, and then eventually turning the franchise into a shared brand between the US and Japan, in a way sort of closing that gap. It's a really cool way to look at it.
That's fair.
Says that while Godzilla 2014 was good, this new movie, King of the Monsters, takes things to the next level and gives Godzilla some purpose again, elevating him. There's another interview with Kyle Chandler and Bear Farmiga that I found interesting. In it, they said that it's day-to-day on whether it's harder to do personal scenes or act against fantastical monsters. It all depends on the context of the moment and how they're feeling that day. Chandler then says the hardest part is getting there, not doing it. It's hard to get to the point where you allow yourself to pretend to act against monsters, and then once you're doing it, it kind of comes naturally. They acted against laser lights and the cries of the monsters. They also had music playing on set to help them get into the emotion of the scene, which is really cool. The elemental effects like fire, rain, explosions were often real, so it was very easy for them to react to. Chandler then says that O'Shea Jackson Jr. would do the best in a world filled with monsters, and he would most likely befriend them. Kyle Chandler then says anything could happen when talking about how O'Shea Jackson Jr. deserves a Godzilla cartoon. I found that one interesting and wanted to bring it up because, of course, O'Shea Jackson Jr., born from Godzilla King of the Monsters, is campaigning to get his very own MonsterVerse animated series due to. So
I recently followed O'Shea Jackson. It's super weird because like he's Ice Cube's kid and all that. And there's someone I know personally who's like a big like rap fan and stuff. It'd be super funny if like they get into Godzilla because Ice Cube's son is a bit like big Godzilla fan and makes their own Godzilla stuff. But I mean, hey, unlikely people making pretty good products. It's happened before, so there is that. And like it would be kind of cool. I would love to see what he could do. Like he's super passionate. Like he feels like one of the boys.
Yeah, although it is interesting because I know there's a bit of a legacy there because his dad, Ice Cube, he was in Anaconda, so there's like history there for being in movies, monster movies and stuff.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, like Ice Cube was in Anaconda. Like Ice Cube Jr. Obviously not his name, but like Ice Cube Jr. was in a Godzilla movie. So like the legacy of the kids being in monster movies, they get bigger and bigger. But yeah.
KDM. The first one is with Drew Edward Johnson of the Godzilla comics. He's the artist. He said that as far as he's aware, Mucho Prime killed the most powerful member of Godzilla's species.
One sec, he says, I'm just gonna pause right here. I believe that at one point in the past, she had killed a Titan that had been the strongest at that time, and had later eggs in its body, and she did some damage to Godzilla where they fought, but ultimately she couldn't stand up to Godzilla's power. She was a contender, but Godzilla's the king. Okay.
To lay her eggs in back in the day, but even that Godzilla was no match to the modern Godzilla.
I guess when I think about it, there are like ideas I have, or problems I guess I have with the idea of, because if we're going off the comics, his name was Dagon, and then Raijin was another name for the monster. You come to this conclusion where, do myths across the world connect because monsters were appearing at different points, which is why you see myths being recorded at different points in history, but having similar points. But like Raijin and Dagon as mythological figures don't really have a huge connection. And then you wonder if, like, at least this is me completely formulating. But I always like the idea that certain monster species became certain archetypes within mythology. So certain monster species became Sky Fathers, so like Zeus, Odin, Yahweh, etc. And then other titans and monsters became like the great serpents, like Tiamat, Leviathan, or like trickster deities always being a certain species, things like that. And like, I guess the reason why they chose Dagon as a deity was because Dagon was like a creature of the sea that the Phoenicians worshipped, and then with Raijin was associated with thunder and lightning, so Godzilla's atomic breath can be seen as like a form of lightning, or being associated with storms, things like that. It's limiting, but it can provide interesting storytelling. But if you don't follow that, then people are going to draw on their understanding of mythology and wonder, okay, so if you're going off of this concept, where does the concept end and the world building begin? And I think probably maybe because Wingard had his own ideas, where he just realized that this idea just didn't work. He scrapped the whole mythological parallels and just decided, oh, there's this whole thing where the Titans are the world had fairy tales and they became humans instead of monsters, blah blah blah. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on that, Vic?
Well, to me, having done what little research I have when it comes to my own worlds and the kaijus within them, I tend to see that within different religions, myths, and cultures, like the gods and the deities tend to have, it's not too uncommon for them to have different names, abilities, or extensions of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you'll have one god who has like different names, or is the son, brother, or
Father,
some other half to them, which is like a similar thing. So I guess it's sort of playing into that, where like you can have different cultures have different names for the same thing, and somehow there's like a connection that either comes into play or gets lost over the generations, which I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I guess. And then the I guess the thing comes into play where like you just have certain things being attributed to gods that exist into more recordable time. So like, you think that as ideas became, like, as recording became more common, where they just phenomenon that they witnessed, and therefore the reason why we don't see mentions of monsters is because they were never actually there. Like, in both The Hunted and then obviously in the movie, we have Godzilla appearing in Rome, and like, was Rome ever influenced by the Titans? Because unless we're saying, like, we're using the term Titan, and Titan's obviously associated with the Greco-Roman pantheon, so like, are they just picking up things from the Greeks, and the Greeks are the ones who actually witnessed these monsters? And then like, what about demigods and stuff? Like, there's this whole level of world building that I feel could be explored in these movies that I feel wasn't, and then it just creates a lot of questions and issues, and ultimately it comes down to a point where We don't know. It's probably never going to be explained. Just leave it up to the creators themselves, because any answer you're going to come up with is like not satisfactory. And I guess like it doesn't have a interesting consumer producer relationship where the consumer isn't able to come up with these interesting ideas that are at least engaging with the fandom, because ultimately the IP isn't providing enough to actually like make you think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Godzilla, who's the king of the monsters. He also wasn't informed that the Orca, which is featured in Godzilla Aftershock, would then go on to be.
Now read this as well. No secrets that I'm aware of, although I wish Aftershock had no idea that Master was a song gadget that was built into her daughter's toy Happy Orca piano was the precursor to the device she later performed the command with Titans. That was a big surprise to me in the first minutes of King of Monsters when I got to see it. So I guess he's responsible for the Orca device, and if he wasn't aware, then the question becomes, did they set him up in the sense where he was supposed to like work out the Orca's ideas, and then the execs were like, this was in the comics, bring this into the movies? It draws a lot of questions. Or was the movie already being produced and then he had to work on the comic, and it just becomes like a coincidence where it's like, oh, I'm surprised that this was in the movie, when it was sort of like a top-down sort of thing.
Be seen in Godzilla King of the Monsters, so he says that was a pretty cool surprise. Greg Keyes, the writer of the King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong novelization, and in my opinion, one of the few men holding the glue together that is the world building of the MonsterVerse, was always kept up to date with the story changes on Godzilla vs. Kong, and so the novelization is written off a near final version of the script, although not the final version, which is why it doesn't really follow a lot of the lost storylines such as the Orca Z. In a second interview with Keyes and KDM, he says he's under the impression that the novelizations.
It's like, I wrote mine as it was. This was my outline. Went through many drafts, subject to approval from Toho and Legendary, and the same was true for the script itself. That said, only very. I had phone and email and Zoom discussions with the writers and directors of both films, as well as individuals of Legendary and Toho tasked with managing the continuity and mythology of the MonsterVerse. There's someone in Hunted who is mentioned as like mythology, so probably it's them that they're communicating with. It was vetted before a write-in and then approved after. Like, I will say this at least, the MonsterVerse novelizations are more faithful than like other novelizations. Like, they're at least like, obviously, since I've been reading through the 98 novelization multiple times, there's a lot of scenes from the 98 novelization that come from the early scripts that we can find online than what actually occurs in the movie. So at least Greg Keyes is kind of holding it together.
Yeah. Because they need Toho and Legendary, and because he has to consult with the mythology department and the directors and writers of the films in order to get them approved.
Every lunch for the past.
I don't care about food. I'm not hungry. And me using weird things, although these things do look kind of interesting, so maybe I might try one day. I may shill one day for this. Speaking of which, if you like Havoc Energy, there's a link in the description. So I recommend it. Always like competition with other energy drinks. So there's that.
Capture process. This comes from the directors and writers of the films in order to get them approved. We have new details about Godzilla vs. Kong's motion capture process. This comes from KDM, where he states that mocap was used for Godzilla vs. Kong here and there, for Kong especially, and a tad for Godzilla and the other creatures. Alan Henry was the Weta mocap performer, and Dave Clayton, the animation supervisor, filled in for the rest. Now, I have some tea that I won't say where it comes from, but it does come from, let's just say, some people in the industry. That one of the reasons you don't see our Godzilla King of the Monsters mocap superstars and performers returning is because it's a lot cheaper for studios to just send in their animation supervisor to go run around in the mocap studio than it is to hire actors who play characters. Basically, the difference is, on one end, you're just getting a guy to do a job that's already basically his job, and he can do it quickly and do as little as possible so that it requires as little pay as possible so that the VFX studios can underbid other companies. Whereas on the other hand, you have to hire actors who, get into character and live the characters and do some fun stuff with the characters and provide some of the most fun we have in MonsterVerse. So as a cost-cutting measure, sometimes they don't do that. And it never sits right with me personally. KDM talks about the Warbat name change, stating,
I agree with that as well. It's kind of weird because like my experience with TJ Storm is the fact that he was I knew him from like an interview that was done with like Resident Evil 5. Yeah, it was Resident Evil 5 where he did a thing with that. So it's really weird that we didn't get him anymore. I wish, like, and when I think of like American Godzilla, that's like who I think of.
Yeah.
that originally Adam Wingard named the creatures Nozuki, and that these were changed to Warbat without his approval. I've got a little bit of tea that I've discussed many times on the channel, but basically it all came down to Playmates testing the name Nozuki, deciding it didn't work, and then eventually landing on Warbat, which they thought did sell the toys to kids. KDM then teases Adam Wingard's dark secret.
Actually, I have a
The
small
dark secret. What do
tidbit
you wanna
about
say?
that because
Yeah.
I got to meet Jared and I think Matt Millard, who designed the Warbat.
Mm-hmm.
I had asked them like about the name thing, and they said that there was never a name for them specifically when they got the, I guess, whatever script memos, and also that both Jared and I think Matt learned they got the job after the toy leaks.
Interesting. That's some deep lore that we're getting. If you could do like an interview with them and like see if you can get in contact with them, because then like it may piece together some information where it's sort of like because at least he's saying Adam Wingard had information. Because we'll roll it back for everyone in the audience at least. Yep, a little bit more. There we go.
Some of the most fun we have in the MonsterVerse, so as a cost-cutting measure, sometimes they don't do that. And that never sits right with me personally. KDM talks about the Warbat name change, stating that originally Adam Wingard named the creatures Nozuki.
So I guess he's saying that he named them Nozuki.
These were changed to Warbat without his approval. I've got a little bit of tea that I've discussed many times on the channel, but basically it all came down to Playmates testing the name Nozuki, deciding it didn't work, and then eventually landing on Warbat, which they thought did sell the toys to kids. KDM.
So I guess it could be a situation to where they got the job after, like, Wingard had the idea, proposed it, it was tested. They don't know, because I don't think there was ever any toys with the names Nozuki. I could be misremembering though, in all honesty. So there is that. Or like there could be tests, like old test images where Nozuki was used, and they're like, nope, it's not testing well, so we'll go with Warbat. And
Yeah,
I think that could line up with what you're also saying as well.
yeah, because I had asked them, what was your reaction to seeing the toy leaks? And they both said, well, that's how we found out that our designs were the ones that got finalized.
So I guess maybe it was a sense where Adam Wingard had an idea for the creature, called them Nozuki. Their designs got finalized. They tested the name. The name was then ditched, so they had no input on the name. And then when the leaks appeared, that's when they got the name Warbat, and therefore like Nozuki wasn't. That's how they found out. So I guess that makes sense. At least getting that timeline down.
KDM then teases Adam Wingard's dark secret truth. It's actually a lot less about Wingard and a lot more about Gareth Edwards, which I found interesting. KDM discussed how directors are essentially just actors, and everything needs approval from executives on what they can talk about. This includes interviews, which in many cases are scripted. Many times interviewers are allowed to submit questions, and then their questions are picked for approval, in which the people behind the scenes can come up with pre-done answers so that you're not throwing the interviewee off. That's not always the case, but it can be the case. KDM revealed that Wingard's original cut of Godzilla vs. Kong was 2 hours and 15 minutes, which was eventually cut down to the 2-hour runtime for the studio, and the work print was about 2 hours 45, but that was never really the intended runtime. Wingard never wanted that. It was eventually cut down because, hey, work prints always are cut down, and they always start too long. It's easier to cut than it is to add. KDM then revealed that Wingard was very happy with the final cut of Godzilla vs. Kong, unlike Gareth Edwards, I didn't know that, who apparently really fought for his vision, but it really was never realized, including the Takarada scene, which he wanted in the movie very badly. But there was so much behind-the-scenes drama that it's no wonder that he walked away from the franchise. I mean, I kind of knew that he had
I think that's interesting too, because like a lot of people like Wingard's vision, so then it makes you wonder, like, I guess it adds to like the perception people have about the industry, where like a really talented creative vision is sort of squashed, and obviously we get people who say what you will about them, whether you like them or not, but they play nicer with everyone, with the studio, so therefore that's why they stay in. So what's it called, that's like why you get Adam Wingard and Michael Dougherty in instead of Gareth Edwards. And I guess it's like disappointing, because I personally like Edwards' vision, and I kind of wonder, like, if he was given more room like Yamazaki was to work on a film, that maybe we would have gotten something better, and maybe might have validated what some of the other people before this video had said. And that's why I put the this video third, because it does make you wonder, at least, all things considered.
I think it also plays
thoughts on that,
into
Vic?
because I think it also plays into a trend of like these big studios will hire like not like first time directors, but like their first big budget movies, because like most of the MonsterVerse actors directors, started out doing like low budget horror type of movies. So I guess in a way it sort of gives the studios more control over them than like big name directors who have more freedom to do their vision.
Yeah, because I can like wonder if like Christopher Nolan or Tim Burton for 98, for example, or Carpenter, even though Carpenter I don't think was as like established and venerated as he was it like in the 90s. Could be getting that wrong off the top of my head, but yeah, like that is something to consider because like Wingard and Doherty, at least for Doherty's case, I remember Trick or Treat. But with Wingard, the only thing I remember from Wingard is Death Note. And with Gareth Edwards, you also have Monsters. And I guess with the fact that like since like Edwards never like worked more with Godzilla, he went on to do Star Wars, then went on to do Creator. I guess like it does make me want to see him come back to it because he is such a big fan and he was so passionate, and I really liked where he was going with things. And if he was able to come back, would he like then get more control over things and be able to steer things in another direction? It just makes me wonder, I guess. But yeah.
A negative experience. I just thought it was because of the stress he was under, but now maybe that's the source of the stress. I know something similar happened to one of the other MonsterVerse directors. I'm sure you can figure out who was under a lot of studio pressure and stress, and maybe some of the things they wanted didn't get fully realized the way they hoped, and so maybe that's one of the reasons that they're not back in a more official capacity.
I do not like your ads, and I know Black said it in the chat. Imagine not using ad blocker because, like, I don't know whether ad blocker ads are detracts from people's views and stuff, and I probably should do more research on that. Honestly, I just don't have the time. But like, I don't mind going through ads and just skipping them because like I want to watch someone's content, and if it means like, hey, you're giving them a boop in the algorithm essentially, and you're helping them get money, like I like certain people, and I like supporting them where I can. I'm not able to subscribe to everyone's Patreon, so doing what I can to help these guys is, I think, valuable to me. But
that's good.
Yeah.
Fully realized the way they hoped, and so maybe that's one of the reasons that they're not back in a more official capacity.
I just want to do it again.
Godzilla X Kong Empire. One of my favorites was the one about Gigan being like a monarch.
So it's tied directly. So these are Reddit stuff. Will tie directly into just by time differences. Skull Lancers takes place before the storm that destroys Skull. Explains how the EV tribes both will feature so many monsters. No new Toho monsters. When it comes to RBF, I think that's using everything this before puts the major advancements of using heat. I think he means heave gravity tech. Gigan is like Space Godzilla is like a Bond villain in Buffalo Bill. Yeah, interesting, but I don't think that ever happened.
And then Super Godzilla, and people actually believe this stuff. He also shut down the one about the fake Kong clone army, which I thought was a lot of fun. And in the same swing, he debunked -1's fake leaks about Godzilla Zero, even though I did see some tweets where it seemed like he himself believed some of those Godzilla Zero rumors. But you know, we all make mistakes.
I'm so happy those rumors never ended up meaning anything, because if that was the case, that would have been like one of the worst Godzilla movies ever, and it just came off as like normie Reddit tier cringe. But do you remember those leaks, Vic, or no?
Yeah, I remember whenever we went over them. I think the last stream we had when we were still talking about it.
Yeah.
Like, also, like if the poster G stylized meant anything at all.
Because like I know, like there was a leak about like the Americans being super involved and like forcing Serizawa to make the Auction and Destroy, and like a lot of the characters from the original film were gonna be in this new film and stuff. It was a weird time. I'm so happy this one ended up the way it did, but yeah.
I've fallen for fake stuff many times, but I'm glad that he cleared the air on it. Godzilla X Kong the New Empire's music score mixer is Alan Mearson. That's cool, I suppose. KDM then weighed in on Legendary's Godzilla contract, confirming that the contract never ended in 2020 and was never going to end with Godzilla vs. Kong. He confirms that Toho is invested in the MonsterVerse and co-produces the MonsterVerse films, and so they have no desire to stop. Thomas Tull announced the trilogy back in 2014 because that's all they could foresee at the time, but it wasn't because that's all they were allowed to do. The fact that Yoshimitsu Banno's name is returning on the new film is proof that the old contract is still in play, as if it was renewed, it probably wouldn't be there anymore. Just to clarify, Legendary Pictures can license any Toho kaiju they want at any time, they just simply have to pay for them.
Okay. That's interesting. So essentially it's like but then like I guess it's a situation where like the Hollywood studios have their cake and eat it too, because if a contract essentially means they can get whatever Toho kaiju they want, the fact that they still have to pay for it means that ultimately the contract doesn't change. Therefore, they're under no stipulation to actually use new Toho kaiju, because then they have to pay for them. So then if it's more, it's going to be like they're going to want to do something that means less money. So why would they ever actually use Toho kaiju and just use their original monsters, because it's far less expensive that way.
Mhm.
And like I wonder, like maybe that's why like after Dominion we never saw like anything in the comics about the other Toho kaiju. So like if what's true about GXK is the case, the only reason why we're seeing a certain Toho kaiju returning is because they have enough of a draw to justify the cost of bringing them back. And like I doubt, although I could be wrong, and I would love someone to clarify me who knows could be wrong. The thing with I doubt using the name Ghidorah meant that they had to pay to use Ghidorah's likeness, because Ghidorah's likeness wasn't really used in the movie. Because so they were really only paying for Godzilla and Mechagodzilla, but they're only going to use essentially the big five, because the big five have the draw of being the quote unquote big five. So there's that.
And then back to the certain character returning. From what D-Man has said in his other videos, like they were originally there, then taken out, and then after test groups responded, they put them back.
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't be there anymore. Just to clarify, Legendary Pictures can license any Toho kaiju they want at any time. They just simply have to pay for them. KDM then teases once again that Monarch Legacy of Monsters will have some connections to Godzilla X Kong the New Empire, although he states they're not as you maybe think. I have no idea what that means. I'm really going to guess it has to do with the relationship between Monarch and Apex. That's going to be my guess. Or maybe some reference to one of the hidden realms like Axis Monkey. KDM then released this list of all the main Godzilla X Kong the New Empire shooting locations, at least for the sound stages. A lot of this stuff is in Australia or Hawaii. And then you got some stuff which was Rio, which was actually shot in Australia or other places like that, where you've got places that are filling in for other places, essentially, which we all knew already. Big news was revealed here as Godzilla X Kong was revealed to be shot in IMAX with IMAX MSM 70mm film with Panavision Canon 1200 lenses. Other cameras used on the shoot were the Alexa 65 with prime, aka fixed focal length lenses, meaning you can't zoom in, but you can choose your focus easier. DNA lenses. This is the first MonsterVerse film shot in D1570 format, and is the first MonsterVerse film shot for IMAX, not optimized for IMAX. This is actually shot for IMAX, which means you can see more of the monsters more of the time with a bigger aspect ratio. There's behind-the-scenes photos of the camera team in Rio, which was shot in Gold Coast, Queensland. That's fantastic. I love the bigger aspect ratio. It just makes them
Queensland
in Grand Lake Pacific Rim or the first Jurassic Park. To bring things way down on an unfortunate note, Lance Reddick, who was the Monarch leader in Godzilla vs. Kong, although his role was significantly cut to just a cameo for the final movie, did pass away at the age of 60. I have discussed that in previous videos that I released last year, but I wanted to bring that back up again. He was a phenomenal actor, and it's just a shame that he went so soon. All right, that'll do it for this one, guys. What was your favorite bit of behind-the-scenes tea that we spilled? I hope I didn't stir too much up.
I guess like when I think of Lance Reddick, I think of like Zavala from Destiny. Even though I'm not a huge Destiny player, I haven't played anything in years, but interesting nonetheless. It's unfortunate he passed away. Really good actor though. I loved it. Like everyone remembers him for his voice, and like he had a really good voice and he had a really good presence, like in John Wick. But there's really too much else. It's just sort of like the outro and all that. Anything else you want to say on this fic at all, or no?
Nothing much. Super interesting to hear all the stories and wondering, how it played out.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So now we move into like the big video. Everyone's probably interesting about the meat and potatoes, the GXK -1 interview with Yamazaki and Wingard. And gotta mute everything for my own sake. Back in. There we go.
My love for Godzilla.
I think probably I want to at least put this on like 1.25 speed, so everyone can sort of absorb what Wingard's saying, because with Yamazaki we can read everything that he's saying a little bit better. So yeah.
My love for Godzilla started whenever I was probably about 6 or 7 years old. The Showa era Godzillas, like the ones from the late 60s, early 70s. I remember we were playing on like daytime television, and and as a kid, it impressed upon me in a big way, because I already loved like dinosaurs and things like that. But like the thing I liked about Godzilla and Mothra and all those characters is that they were real characters. And so those sequences in the original Godzilla movies, where you're really just with the monsters and they have their own dynamics, really spoke to me a lot as a kid.
僕が子供の頃は野球中継が雨で中止になるとゴジラの映画をやってたんですよ。で 雨傘番組って言われてたんですけど、その頃はだから本当に父親は野球がすごい好きだったんで、晴れろ晴れろと思ってるし、僕はゴジラが見たいから雨降れ雨降れと思ってたんだけど、最初に見た時は多分ものすごい怖い体験だったと思うんですけど、でも怖い中に何かすごい魅力を感じてしまって、なんと怪獣映画を作ることで生活してる人がいるんだってのが分かったんで、もう絶対その仕事やりたいと思って。
I think
At least I find that it's. I have to make a Godzilla, like American Godzilla video eventually, but it's super interesting and quaint. Not a bad way, but like awesome in a way that Yamazaki's dad is like a huge baseball fan, which is obviously American sport and America's pastime. And then like having a father who grew up with a sport that's like uniquely American, came into Japan, and then his son ends up like being a huge Godzilla fan, something that is uniquely Japanese, inspired by American monster movies, goes over, makes this Godzilla movie that ends up winning the Oscars. Like it makes for the perfect story, I guess. But like I have a lot of issues with Wingard's movies, but like very much Wingard's movies do have that, like at least the attempt to emulate those late 70s films. But then like that also speaks to the fact that like the reason why those films were coming out is because the fact is like they are more of the schlockier, funner, quote unquote funner Godzilla movies, in the sense where like there isn't really like as much of a message being used to elevate the themes of the movie. It's a lot about like the monster movie, like the monster action appealing to like children, and of course like that's like where you grew up with, is like as a kid. So
I think part of it is also the films, both like the Showa ones and the, I guess, the Wingard duology we're gonna have, is that the monsters are sort of treated more like characters rather than like these disasters that are built on metaphors.
yeah, like metaphorical disasters and more
Yeah.
characters. I guess that's very true, and I think like I guess that comes from the tradition of the Showa era and the later Heisei versus films. Whereas I think like there's a lot of properties in America that like fell into similar like tropes, in the sense where like the characters didn't really meet as much, but they still were like following their archetype, as it were. I always think of Conan as like a big example, which again, another video I'm gonna have to make to expound on that topic. But I think like Primal is a more modern example of that, where you're taking like the archetype of the caveman and the T-Rex, you're pairing them up together and having them in like a very typical Lost World. Emulating the show era is the worst decision you can make. Why go backwards instead of moving forwards? Evolving storytelling. Why stagnate? I think that like you can emulate the Showa era, but I think that if you have the budget to have like a mythology team, creative decisions teams, and you're not working in a sense where you're just making another movie off of the back of another director, or you are the director having to make another movie, you should do what at least like the first 2-3 John Wick films did. I haven't seen the fourth one. And what those films did, where they had a world. The theming is not as heavy, not as deep. There's not as much dialogue explaining like ideas, but a lot is being said with very little. And because of that, you're able to have this idea of like Godzilla as a character and these other monsters as characters, but exist in a world that makes sense. I think that can work. And I think that like, had that been what the MonsterVerse was doing, it could be an evolution of the Showa films. I think would have been done in an acceptable way, because not only are you doing something that like everyone remembers, but you're elevating it. And I think that like that there is at least a level of stagnation that occurs. And I think the only reason why I would consider it stagnation is because of the fact that like we understood the faults of the Showa films, and we also have the budget of America. So therefore we should be trying to be on the level of the Showa films. We should be trying to be better because we've learned from them. I'm not sure if you have anything to say on that, Vic.
Well, I would personally argue that in ways it's sort of improving on the Showa era because of how it's using bigger budgets and modern effects. Because like I agree that like what we're getting with like the more recent MonsterVerse films are basically plays on the Showa era tones and style. that we got from the old movies, but I personally think they're a little more better and well made overall. Because like those films have charm to them that I think, for me personally, I still see in the new MonsterVerse films, which is why I really enjoy them. It's just a thing where it comes to, again, how the monsters are more treated as characters and how the style of the storytelling is sort of evolving into that same pattern we saw in the show era.
Yeah, and Black also makes some point. VFX mean nothing if the writing story don't support it. I think like that's the thing that comes to my mind is that unlike I think the show films for what they are and given the circumstances that they had to work with, I think they still are better than the MonsterVerse films because you're seeing these huge budgets and like 2014 and Kong Skull Island are some of the best MonsterVerse films visually, and it makes you wonder that like with these bigger budgets, why are we not seeing that same level of quality that had occurred in those films? But let's keep moving here.
Godzilla's been, you know, so popular over the years because, I mean, you can just take Godzilla -1 and, you know, my film Godzilla Kong: The New Empire, and these two films couldn't be more tonally different from each other. I think that's what's so cool about Godzilla is that, you know, metaphorically, tonally, you know, he's just very versatile in terms of, you know, what he can mean and represent in the movies.
その時代その時代の何かその時代を映し出す鏡にもなってるっていうことがすごくゴジラっていう IP のこの長きにわたってずっと人気を保ってられるっていうことの一番大きな理由じゃないかなっていうふうに思います。恐ろしいものが恐ろしいゴジラで強いゴジラを見たいっていうのが一番原点にあるんでどうしても作るとそういう方に行ってしまったんですけど、ただその昭和のゴジラのすごいおっしゃったようなサイケデリックな楽しいゴジラっていうのはそれはそれですごくゴジラの大切な要素なんで、それをアダムさんがやってくれてるからこそ僕らは反対方向に思いっきり触れるっていう意味でゴジラっていう IP の幅広さをずっと現代でも維持。
I know a lot of people are using it as like a gotcha to wear. A lot of people are like harping on Rick the Rodent's statement like yes we can have both. I think people overestimate the versatility of Godzilla's character and how his versatility can water down the point of the character. And people trying to like have this like weird almost trad understanding of the character to where because Godzilla in the past was silly, therefore it is technically traditional that Godzilla can be silly. Versus the point of Godzilla was to be serious. The reason why Godzilla became sillier is because of these reasons. So therefore, to really honor like the traditional understanding of Godzilla, Godzilla must remain a certain way. That's like, at least that's me being as charitable to it as possible. I know Black says they're trying to do the Barbenheimer thing with -1 GXK and it's worked as well as Barbenheimer did because Barbie was a terribly written movie. GXK looks to be worse. I may be taking. I literally one person I talked to, she's super nice. Got me a bunch of notepads and the like, and I use them for notes and I use them for drawings. So I'll be bringing one of those with me, and I'll be taking a lot of notes. I'm always super bad about the bringing my phone, opening up my phone, like opening night of a movie to take notes, and like people look at me and like wonder why I'm doing this, and I'm like, I'm a YouTuber, does Godzilla stuff. I do like, and I think like it's gonna be a lot worse because like it's gonna be a dark theater, but I at least feel like a little bit better about myself if I'm taking notes with like pen and paper instead of like opening up my phone and ruining other people's movie experience by accident or not. Because I only started taking notes for -1 because I knew I was seeing it only like 2 days after the first showing I had to where I was like taking out my phone. But yeah, Batman can be silly because Adam West and Brave and the Bold exist. And like, that's a good point. And I know and Shoma wanted to talk about Batman and Godzilla, and I don't want to like spoil all my cards here, but I think like Brave and the Bold works well because like Batman as a character and the writers don't undermine Batman as a character because the events taking place are Silver Age silliness. Like Batman is still serious. They play him straight to everything else that occurs. And we understand the charm and we're able to have well-written stories because of that. Whereas the Adam West Batman show, I feel, is more a product of its time, and I like it because it's a product of its time. But I wouldn't want to see a Batman property be as silly as the Adam West Batman. There was a time and a place for that, and I think with how Batman is portrayed in the comics, video games, and everywhere else, there isn't room for Batman to be taken as like be silly, have his plot lines be not as well written and not as serious. Any thoughts on that, Vic?
Well, I definitely think that within any iteration of something, if it was made for the time, I think it shouldn't really try to be replicated in the same way, one for one, because it's from a certain time. But I think you can definitely take some elements of it and turn it into something new and make it better and more to the time, which I think is what the MonsterVerse films currently are doing. They're taking the charm of the Showa era movies that they definitely had and that a large part of the fandom still remember, and doing a modernized version of it, which is what I enjoy.
I guess, like, do fans remember the late Showa Godzilla films because they're silly, or because they liked Godzilla being the hero and fighting other monsters? I think, who said it? F29 said, "Isn't that a whataboutism?" So, like, a whataboutism in the logical fallacy sense is when you compare two things, but one of the points isn't analogous enough. So I'm not gonna switch over like I did with the Rick the Rodent video. So if you just type in whataboutism, a whataboutism is the technique or practice of responding to an accusation or a default question by making a counter accusation or raising a different issue. And then the example they use is the parliamentary hearing apprehended to be an exercise in whataboutism. Of course, they're not using an actual example, which is stupid. But so, like, another example you can find on Google Images, you just contradicted yourself. What about the fact you previously said? Stop there. That's what about. So I wish there was like a simple, quick one. But a good example of a whataboutism is like saying Godzilla was intended to be serious. Godzilla became serious, so Godzilla must be serious. This is the same thing as Batman. Batman shouldn't kill because Batman is serious, so therefore, a Batman who's a killer is a bad Batman. Because the comparison isn't the same, we're talking about like Godzilla being serious as well, but then we're talking about a specific example with Batman, and therefore everything that applies to Godzilla can apply to Batman. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying there's at least similarity that can occur. And a lot of issues with fallacies is that like the situation has to be super declarative. So I'm not saying that Batman and Godzilla are easily one-to-one, but I'm saying there are similarities that we get drawn on, but that requires you to then look at both IPs, provide examples, and provide context to why these examples are analogous. So, like, for example, if I said Batman is a killer in Justice League Gods and Monsters, it's a bad Batman because Batman doesn't kill. The point of Justice League Gods and Monsters is the fact that Batman in that universe is not Bruce Wayne, it's Kurt Langstrom or Man-Bat in the normal continuity. And the entire point is to show a universe where the main trio are different and more murderous, and their personalities are different in a way. Another example would be bringing up, what about Thomas Wayne Batman? And that is an interesting conversation in itself, because that also provides another layer of conversation to where like the mantle of Batman, or like what can Batman be, and that can tie into things about like Godzilla's appearance, and I've brought things up with that in relation to Godzilla 98. But again, the specificity of the argument, as well as how declarative you're making a statement as to whether or not something is in itself a logical fallacy, because some things can appear like fallacies when they aren't, and some things cannot appear like fallacies, but when you actually break them down and the point that's being made, they are not. I understand the point that you're making, but yeah, so there's that. But let's continue. But actually, before I continue, Vic, anything you want to say on that point, or no?
Well, honestly, like I didn't really understand some parts of what you were saying, but thinking about it, I think overall, when it comes to like, I guess talking about how like in some ways it may be bad to like try to replicate something of a certain era, or that doing it now is going backwards. I think there's still you still have to be able to move forward by taking what works. And I think for some people within the fandom, what worked was the character and the charm of Godzilla as a hero, and delving into that escapist fantasy of him. And I still think the MV is doing that better in ways than some of the show era, because I've always been a proponent that there are moments in the show era that were goofy because it was written that way to appeal to kids. And even if there's similar stuff to that in the MV, I don't think it's goofy because there's still a more grounded take to it than what would have come from the show era.
I guess it also comes to an examination to where, because the MV has shifted so hard from serious to goofy, that it feels more consistent because you're getting that goofy off of 2 films. Like you're 3 films in, you start the 4th film is kind of goofy, then it goes really goofy. Whereas when you think about it, you have Gojira, Raids Again, Kong, Mothra, and then get over to 3 at Monsters when you kind of start to get goofy with the Showa era, and then afterwards, you get Son of Godzilla, Astro Monster, which are very tonally different. And then Astro Monsters is also different. And then you get late Showa. It makes you wonder, and like, how much of that time is needed for you to feel like this is goof, and like in a bad way.
But then I would have to ask you, what is goofy? Like, what do we define as goofy, and what makes the Showa goofy moments goofy, and what makes what you would say are the goofy moments in GVK or GXK from what we've seen?
Yeah, no, that's fair. But then that also comes down to like, you need time to actually properly explain the facts of why something is goofy and is bad in MV versus bad in Showa, to where I don't think, obviously, since you're having these discussions on like Reddit and Twitter, and less on like YouTube or on live streams, to where people are actually given time to explain all this in detail, or will be given time to research and then explain it, and it causes like a disconnect of people to get all ass mad about things. But it's neither here nor there. But then like, there's like people in my like life where like, well, they'll look at Godzilla, they'll think Godzilla's goofy, and like there's people like I bring over and I've like made them watch so many Godzilla movies, and they're like, it's Godzilla, it's kind of goofy, and then there's kind of serious Godzillas, but like there's a level of investment that is required for these people to have the conversation. And yeah, like,
yeah,
I would love to bring a bunch of people on, since obviously now that I pay for StreamYard, I can have more people in these conversations. So I would love for people to be like, hey, let's set up a time, just have time to research like your point and then present it. I think would be important. But yeah, like at least that's like more like where my thought process occurs, if that makes sense. But
I think part of that might also have to do with taste, and because it's part has to do with taste when it comes to like what people see as goofy, and then what may actually generally be actual goofiness.
I guess. But then like, that also comes with research too. Like, where is the cultural consensus on goofy? Where's your like level? Like, where do you draw the line at goofy? Like, we use terms that like everyone uses, but then we all have very specific like meanings to what these words mean. But then like no one actually wants to examine the language they're using. Excuse me, the language they're using, and come to an understanding of what these things are. And I think that like, it's important to like have these discussions here, because as much as like I think media is important, this is a higher stakes area of discussion, to where differentiating ideas and like an understanding of what someone means by a word can be displayed here versus in a more high stakes situation like politics, since obviously we brought up politics in relation to Godzilla movies. So but I think that like there's been such a melding of these ideas, like the personal being the political, everything's political, stuff like that occurring. And you have a generation that has grown up on this sentiment, and like not everyone has enough time to be a YouTuber and examine these topics or isn't as invested in media as we are. And because of that, they feel that like the person is political. I have my opinion. I don't really want to be challenged on my opinion, or I don't really want to have a situation to where like I'm seen as a bad person because the politics I'm providing are quote unquote bad. And it causes me to be pushed in certain spaces, and it causes these spaces to become more insulated, and it blocks up discussion. And I think that like the huge issue I have with like toxic positivity is the thing that like everyone says, oh, this is all good, this is all good, and then ultimately we don't examine why something is good or like why people like things, and we take things for granted, and why like you have a lot of media that ends up becoming slop. And I think that like personally as a writer, I want to understand like why people like things, why are certain people like personality types attracted to archetypes or certain stories. And it's not just because like you want to maximize on an audience and therefore make money that way. I think that like good art is derived from people having an understanding of like the ideas that they want to come up with, but then executing them in a way that's not only satisfactory to them, but like resonates with people. And I think that there's a distinct lack of modern movies resonating with an audience, and then when they do resonate, they're resonating in a way specifically to cater to people who share a insulated view and are distinctly done at the expense of an out group. But that's neither here nor there, and probably I'm losing a bunch of people unfortunately with like my ramblings. So I will continue.
思いっきり触れるっていう意味で、ゴジラっていう IP の幅広さをずっと現代でも維持できてると思うんですよ。だからそれはもう本当にお互いのパートを精一杯やることっていうのはすごくゴジラにとっていいことなんじゃないかなというふうに思ってます。
If I was programming a triple feature for IMAX, the three movies I would pick would be Godzilla vs. Smog Monster, Godzilla -1, and then I would say Godzilla vs. Destroyer.
初代1個目、GMK、シン・ゴジラ、あとアダムさんのは、ゴジラ対コングをやりたいですね。
I love how humble Yamazaki is. Like he's the like I think he's no more perfect, but he's like the Giga Chad director in a sense where like he's super humble, is very respectful in terms of, like everything he says, and like the look in Wingard's face here, where it, like I obviously I'm like inferring here, but it feels like you could tell like how honored he feels that like Yamazaki would put him in like a triple billing like this. But yeah, I know Yamazaki, the Chad Yamazaki is very much a thing. But if we're speaking of in the comments for everyone who is still watching, and I thank you all for still watching, what would your 3 Godzilla movies be for the billing? And we'll start off with you, Vic. What would you do for the 3 billings for like yourself?
Like an IMAX showing?
Yeah, if like you had like a triple feature IMAX showing like they're doing.
All right. So first off would be, I think, let me think. Okay, I'm just go 98 first, top of the list. Just because I also
out of
want
my
that
stream.
experience.
You don't belong.
Yeah, so 98, and then I think I would want to do the original. 54, definitely.
Let's say because neither of them brought up the original, we don't get to include the original.
So no original?
No
All right,
original.
then next would be, because I'm trying to think IMAX and then on the big screen. The reason I pick 98 is because I think there's a lot of good scaling in that movie, and I want to see it like on the big screen because I've never seen it on the big screen ever.
Oh, really?
And then I would want to do. I would want to do. It's hard to pick, but maybe I'll go with GVK since I do like it's a very like, theater event type of movie. And I think maybe Tokyo SOS.
A good take. I'll take that. I'd probably say part of me wants to put GMK in there because it's GMK, and same thing. Shin GMK. There's a lot of films that are like easy shoe-ins, I guess. I'd probably say if I was to do a triple billing without the easy picks, so I'm overtly removing 54, -1, 2014, GMK, and Shin from the equation, I would do Mothra versus Godzilla, Godzilla versus Biollante, and then Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. Those would be the three that I'd include for a billing, and that's me like specifically omitting films because I think like if I really wanted to, I would do like 54 GMK -1 or 54 Shin -1. Like that second place is like such an easy one, but like my 54 -1 like is such an easy shoe in to where like it doesn't seem fair to like other films where I'm like I could really do something interesting with those. And I guess like technically I'm doing a versus for all of these because like at least with the case of 64, I'm putting in 64 because I think it has a good message. Plus, it introduces an original monster in the form of Mothra, and has some of the really like some of the best effects of the Showa series. 84, you're still getting pretty classic Godzilla, but you're also getting an interesting new story, and you're getting a new monster as well. And I think that's like a solidly directed Heisei film. And I want to at least keep things within all the eras. And I think that like against Mechagodzilla is a pretty solid Millennium film, excluding GMK. And if like I'm not including like against Mechagodzilla or GMK, it's like Final Wars would be like the one because it's just so balls to the walls. But yeah. Not says -1 2014 GMK, and Brandon says 64, 74, and 89, which are also good takes.
ゴジラ対コングの最初こう敵同士だったのが2人が共闘してメカゴジラと戦うっていう展開がものすごい実は好きで燃えましたね。IMAX の大画面で見てみたいなというふうに思います。
Okay, so now that you've seen GXK, is there one sequence, from your perspective, that you would recommend people seeing in IMAX?
でも IMAX 一番聞くところはどうかな。やっぱりラストの戦いがもうやっぱ IMAX で見たらもう迫力がすごすぎて興奮すると思いますけどね。お互いに凄まじい力を持った者同士の戦いなんで、一つの動作で周りはたくさん大変なことになってしまって、それを IMAX で体験できたらすごいゴージャスな映画館に行くべき映画っていう風になるんじゃないかなというふうに思います。逆にゴジラ-1を見て、絶対 IMAX で見るべきだと思うシーンとかちょっとは何だと思いますか？I
would definitely have to say the sequence in -1 where Godzilla's in the city and you have that great shot where you show the scales and they're popping up, which I thought was such a brilliant idea. It's kind of like a gun cocking or something, but I thought that was a really, really amazing sequence, especially for something that, after 30-something Godzilla movies, you would think that there wouldn't be a fresh way to show off Godzilla using his atomic breath, and you managed to pull it off somehow, which is impressive too, because Shin Godzilla, I thought, had the second best version of that up until now, which was whenever he's firing his beam into the ground and it's firing. So kudos to you there.
Yeah, no, like Vic, if like you think of like two scenes from like -1 and GVK, I keep saying GXK, dang it, GVK, that you feel I like those two standout moments. What would you say those would be?
Let's see, for -1, I think it would be, for me, I think my favorite part of -1 visually was probably the all the first scenes of him chasing the boat and battling the first battleships. I think visually were stunning and like very, I guess, fresh in a way, because we really hadn't seen something like that for a while, really. And probably, I guess, in a similar way for GVK, the first sea battle for a very similar reason.
Right?
Yeah.
Any particular reason why for the Tasman Sea fight? Is essentially the same as -1's?
Yeah, I guess similar reasons, because like something with Godzilla is that he's a sea monster,
Mhm.
So, and we really haven't seen a film where we really got to see, or it's been a while since we
Mhm.
saw him return to the sea and battle like battleships in that way.
Yeah. I would second that, at least with minus one case. Godzilla versus the Shinsei Maru and then versus the Takao are like two really good scenes, and I think like I like that because the easy choice is the Ginza attack, but I think that when you're having Godzilla fight the military or fight military vessels, unless it's a named ship like the Gotengo or the Super X or a mecha, there isn't really any character to the military outside of aesthetics with the films, or like the JSDF is sort of seen as just like a force and a character wholly in and of itself. Whereas in the case of at least both the boats, you have the Shinsei Maru, which is like a dingy small boat with its 13 millimeter cannon, and you see its effect that it has with the mines on Godzilla that causes like Godzilla to like get his face blown off, and then ultimately the like that scene there. But then like right as Godzilla's about to roar, you have the Takao hit him. And I guess like the thing that like hits the most for me is when kids like yells the name of the ship, and obviously he's injured, so like, it has like a really guttural sound to it when he says like the ship's name, and he's so excited to see the ship, and he's like it ties in so much to his character with being obsessed with like the Imperial Army in like a really naive way, which is like for some people would say is like problematic, but like for me I think it's like it's endearing because of his naivety. But then you see Godzilla like start to tear the ship apart, and because you like know the ship's decommissioned, you see like small details about like what like cannons on a decommissioned ship look like. But then as Godzilla like punches his way through the hull, you see like these guns like slowly turn to hit him in the side to like get him off the ship, and it's like it really builds the character of the ship like trying its best to ward off something that it really can't fight. And like you think that maybe it might have done something, but ultimately you have the moment where the blue light is emanating from below it and Divine is playing in the background, and like a gun you see the atomic breath just shoot through the ship, and then it explodes, and the sound design and music adds to that with Godzilla's roar right at the end for his victory, which is like it's a similar shot to how Godzilla appears over the Tasman Sea, but like you see like more detail on this Godzilla in terms of like his injuries from the atomic breath and him healing. And obviously since Godzilla roars here instead of how he does in the Tasman Sea, it just has more oomph to it. But I guess like in the case of the GVK, I'd probably say Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. Even though like the film's called Godzilla versus Kong, I don't think anyone was under the impression that the film wouldn't be a team up, because like you can't really diss a whole like side of the fandom over things like that. And like there's a lot of things you do have to ignore in my opinion, but when you see like Godzilla and Kong throw Mechagodzilla into a building, and then Kong block a shot from Mechagodzilla at Godzilla, and Mechagodzilla using all his weapons and stuff to knock them off, it triggers that like that fun fan film theory, like fan fiction vibe in your head of like the two famous monsters fighting like another famous monster that so happens to be like the mechanical rival to another monster. It does like one of the other creators that we watched here said, like it does have that wrestling kind of vibe to it, and I think that's why I appreciate, because I am a fan of it. And that's like just purely going off the scenes and like adhering to the format that's shown here for the creators.
Thanks for coming out. It's been a real pleasure meeting you. So,
はい、すごく楽しい時間でした。いろんなことをすごく考えてるってことが伝わってきたし。
Absolutely. Good.
はい。
Let me give you a hug.
And again, Yamazaki is the Chad. We cannot deny the Chad is Chadazaki. I put that in the chat there. it is one of those things I do like. But yeah, no, that is as I interview, like it's definitely interesting, and I love the differences between the two, between Yamazaki and Wingard. But we now move into the final act of it. And that is Godzilla X Kong the Hunted. I don't have everything in terms of I don't have all the screenshots, and I'm not gonna show my face and try to flip through pages as well. But at least when it's relevant, I'll maybe bring up some images. And that is Godzilla X Kong the Hunted. Like I said earlier in the stream, I think this is like middle of the road in terms of MonsterVerse comics. Vic, have you read the comic at all, or know anything about it, or not really?
When it comes to the comics, I don't normally like really read them. I remember when 2014 came out, I had Awakening, and then I have the Godzilla Dominion, and I read that. Well, I haven't gotten the Hunted yet.
Yeah. So, like, in terms of price, it's gonna run you about $19.99 US. Obviously, since I work in a store, I get 50% off that, so it wasn't as big of an expense for myself. So there is that. So the entire story follows a specific person named Raymond Martin. As probably intentional. It's never said like anywhere in like the concept stages or anything like that, but Raymond Burr, Raymond Martin is a guy who experienced the Mito attacks, and he works for a company, or is the head of a company called RM Construction, and it is the death of like his extended family, so father, mother, like wife and child, that causes him to become obsessed with hunting and killing titans, and he produces a weapon, in this case a giant robot in the form of the Titan Killer. And a lot of the story is set up around him testing out the machine, and then later on going into the Hollow Earth to start killing more titans. He runs into the titan down there, Kong, and they have a scuffle. While on the surface, he's using, and I'm spoiling everything for you guys, so I guess I have the banner, so there's the Tizumi spoilers for you guys. But he's using a beacon that simulates radiation leaks to lure Godzilla away from the Hollow Earth and away from wherever he is, so that he can conduct his activities. Because early on in the book, you see him bag a feline titan. There's actually two different feline titans in the book that he ends up fighting against, and he essentially is using the data from fighting these other titans to then essentially beef his way up to fighting Godzilla, but ultimately runs into Kong and runs afoul of Kong. And I think that at least this is appropriate, where I'm gonna go into Blackaroni's video on No Sympathy for the Monster, because it's super relevant to his character, or in Raymond's character in this case, because the MonsterVerse has essentially an archetype that I've come to dub, which I'll look at in a second, and I'll maybe, again, I wish I had more time, but to do a video on. And I think it's relevant at least to show Black's video, because there's a lot of things I do agree with in terms of like world building or where things do go. So that is, we'll share that again. And we finally ditch this, and now we go into No Sympathy for the Monster. And we'll do this as a 2x speed type thing.
From what I remember of this video, I think I personally had some disagreements with it.
And we'll do this in 2x speed. Because I'm able to summarize this pretty well. We'll do it at 2 times the Tism speed. And the Kaiju Killer is a monster, like alien monster thing, while the Titan Killer is just purely a robot. But their purposes are like, they're both trying to kill monsters, but like the end goal is different. So there is that for the comment there. Or the Titan Hunter, Titan Killer. Yeah. It's late. I'm sorry. And yeah, it is Titan Hunter. It's not Titan Killer. My bad.
Look at these scenes. Look at them and imagine you stuck in the chaos, the pandemonium, the carnage. Imagine. What would you do? How would you react? Would you react negatively? What would you do? Now let's go back in time to 2001. The Twin Towers are falling and the loved one jumps off one of the windows in hopes of maybe surviving. Long story short, they don't. The building ends up collapsing, crushing anyone that might be unfortunate enough to be there. Imagine you're the daughter of Victoria Alvarez Brito and you find out your mother died after spending a whole vacation with her not too long before. How would you feel? What would you do? Now imagine that instead of terrorists, it was Godzilla that got your mother killed. Would you hate him? Would you call for his extermination? Would you weep? What happens when you find out people are actually advocating for his study and preservation? What if you found out a company was preventing the government from killing him? What would you do? Would you join protests against his existence? Would you stop paying your taxes to a government that fails to deliver justice for your mother? Would you leave the country and join forces with those that hunt Godzilla down? People like you, people that can help you avenge your mother and seek justice for those who lost so much because of it. Would you curse God for allowing such an abomination to exist? What would you do? I want you, the viewer, to picture yourself in a scenario in which you had to interview one of the victims of such a disaster. What will they tell you? Will they tell you, oh, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away? I can imagine a small handful will, but what about the majority? Will they Ryan Gosling their way out of it and say, it is what it is? Will they feel any sympathy for the thing that destroyed their homes and murdered their loved ones, intentional or otherwise? Obviously, yes. I mean, who wouldn't want to sympathize with a 200-year radioactive soaring birth from the fiery embers of the nuclear holocaust? This is obviously humanity's fault for merely existing and needing nature's resources to survive. Humans are so bad. God forbid anyone's loved ones survive. They probably polluted one time in a metropolitan area with no trees, and now nature is getting its revenge for it. I bet they probably never planted a tree before. Good riddance. This is environmentalism, a childish and naive philosophy that has been plaguing this franchise for almost 7 decades.
How dare you?
The idea that humans are bad and inherently evil, and so nature murdering them is an objective good. That is the type of character Emma Russell is, and is painted as sympathetic and King of the Monsters. Well, I am here to tell you that everyone responsible for this is an idiot and they should be ashamed of themselves. Yeah, I'm that guy. I am him. And before you rant in the comments, let me cook. I promise I have a good gourmet meal prepared for this while DBK is still in the oven. Let's get philosophical for a minute. Good and evil are defined as objective things that can be measured. Good is characterized by that which enriches, enhances, brings forth life, lengthens life, and maintains sentient beings' existence. Certain attitudes are good because it brings people together, and having people on your side increases your chance of survival. Basic caveman instinct behavior that is still present to this day in less nihilistic parts of the world. Evil, however, seeks to destroy, not create. Evil is unmaking. It reduces. It brings forth death. It is the antithesis of creation, destruction. A lot of religions, including Christianity, operate under this paradigm. God is the creator, source of love and goodness and morality, and Satan is a destroyer, the source of hatred, immorality, evil. All of these concepts are intertwined, evil with destruction and good with construction. Now that we've established this, let me ask you a question. What is Godzilla known for the most? I'm going to assume you're an intelligent fella and say you understand what my point is, right? And you might argue that Godzilla doesn't destroy things intentionally or is trying to destroy something intentionally, but to that, my answer is, number one, we are not looking for intent. We're looking for the act itself. And it's not like Godzilla shows any remorse for the people he kills anyways, because most of the time he doesn't even know they're there. I mean, he's not even aware of it. Ignorance is not the same as innocence, Miss Lane. Number two, there is still destruction. And even if greater destruction is prevented by it, it still happens nonetheless. And more people would die as more fights occur, which is, well, all the time in movies like this. So, as you can see, answers 1 and 2 are intertwined. Godzilla is a living mutant, and the monsters he fights are either the same or worse than that. So can someone please explain to me why I should ever feel any sympathy for him? What, simply because he didn't ask to be made? Most things don't ask to be made. That's just the way it is. I'm just a messenger. What, are you the sapient, sentient entity floating in the ether before you materialize into your mother's womb that has the right, or rather is entitled to demand being brought forth into being? I'm not a philosopher, and I'm not going to pretend to be, but, you know, Godzilla existing does not mean we should just keel over and allow him to turn us into the bone marrow feminists in 2030 will use to impregnate themselves. I'm not that self-hating. And can someone, for the love of God, please tell me why I should feel anything? I will feel sympathy for my fellow man, a man whom I despise with every fiber of my being, a man I want expunged from this mortal plane, a lot faster than I would a monster that is pancaking people in preposterously populous proportions. These people could have been somebody. They could have found salvation. They could have been happy, achieved their dreams, and all those lives are just mushed away in an instant. And I'm supposed to cheer when I see that, and feel bad when Godzilla gouges humans out of the sockets of life because he didn't want to exist. I wonder if people would feel the same if 9/11 was caused by a giant monster instead of a 6'5". Jesus Christ! He's in the height range of those TikTok women with zodiac signs in their bio. Bro's playing for the wrong rockets. Stop trying to make me feel bad that Godzilla is killing millions of people. Hell, Godzilla movies are at their best when he's made out to be the villain, since that was the original intention. Yes, I'm a purist, assuming. If Godzilla really didn't want to hurt civilians, assuming that argument comes up, why would he keep doing it? Why not move to a place without humans populating the place instead of transforming the cities fighting into a place without human population? There's more nature in the world than there are cities. Sure, he piss off a lot of vegans and maybe farmers depending on who he chooses to fight, but hey, the lesser of two evils. And you should always piss off a vegan. It is always morally correct. If you were to interview me, the victim of a Godzilla attack, and you were to tell me to feel bad, why should I? Why should I, the victim, feel bad for the entity or entities that have taken the lives of my beloved ones? And if you want to argue that Godzilla is a mindless animal, then that would make me feel sympathy even less, because now I know what will be asking why this is happening once I put it down. Here's a fun thought experiment. Would you kill a rabid, mindless elephant trying to kill you? Or better yet, if you knew it felt pain, both physical and emotional, would you still kill it? The answer would and should be yes, and if you say no, then you're either a bridge jumper or you're lying. There's an entire episode of Primal dedicated to this if you don't believe me. Also, watch Primal. It's real good show. If a rabid elephant were to try and kill me, he would probably succeed. But if I am to die, I will die roaring! I'm gonna fight my way into surviving because I don't want to die. I'd probably not be happy since that animal didn't choose to be rabid, but who the hell cares? I'm not dead. It is what it is. It became rabid. Nothing anybody could have done about it. I'm just happy I'm not dead. Are you? Do you want me alive? You want me to be alive, right? Right? If the elephant didn't threaten to take my life, I wouldn't feel the need to take his, because if I hadn't, I would have died. Same with Godzilla. I wouldn't feel the need to try and kill him if he didn't come to my city and kill everyone in it. Unless it's New York, or California, or England, or Canada. Who am I kidding? Why would I live in those places? Godzilla would ironically be a hero if he did that, honestly. So, in conclusion, stop defending Godzilla for doing all of this. He's a menace to the entire city. I want that radioactive lizard prosecuted. I want him strung up by his tail. I want Godzilla!
And I'm gonna back out here. And I know Vicky, obviously you had different opinions on it, so I want to hear your thoughts on this.
I think when it comes to Godzilla in general, a lot of that stuff does and can apply. I guess it would just depend on how Godzilla is written, like whether or not he's more of like I mentioned before, if he's more of a meant to embody a natural disaster or more deeper metaphor for something, or if you want to treat him as a character with certain traits and I guess meanings to him. Because I think some of the things he said doesn't apply to Godzilla in the MonsterVerse because of the way he's characterized as this neutral force that, as he said, doesn't really think about humans or how, as a whole, they are affected by him.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense, it's sort of like that godlike quality where, you know, he's never really the direct cause or intentionally does one thing or another, you know?
Mm-hmm.
He is basically a force that is dedicated to keeping a overall general balance of nature, which I think is also plays into the overall theme of the MonsterVerse and having that balance of nature and learning how to coexist with it rather than it going one way or the other.
I guess my thoughts on this is that, like, if we really look at Godzilla's history during the Showa era, I said this in the last Longman stream I did, which was on the Rick the Rodent video. Godzilla really, after he stopped being a villain and became a hero, he never really engaged monsters in cities. Like, it was very rare for him to actually fight monsters in areas with people. And one of the biggest examples I could think of where he like appears right when we know there's people evacuating, it's to defend them, and that's like in Terra Mechagodzilla, the literal end of the Showa series. And there, it's like when Titanosaurus first appears, Godzilla appears in that city specifically to fight Titanosaurus, and after Titanosaurus retreats, Godzilla like leaves. There's not a whole lot of property damage done there, and Godzilla then appears again to stop Titanosaurus and Mechagodzilla, and ultimately there's not a lot of property damage done there either, and it transitions into like a less populated area. Like, Godzilla does the let's fight somewhere empty scenario from Dragon Ball Z and does not do a whole lot of property damage. And like the whole, even when in Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, when fake Godzilla is destroying buildings and stuff, everyone's kind of surprised that's Godzilla, and that makes sense because in the case of Godzilla destroying stuff, it's been years since Godzilla's done that, so it is out of character for him to act in this way because he hasn't done so in like literal years and like almost like decades at this point in that timeline. And then in the case of in the Heisei series, like, of course, like Space Godzilla is the biggest example to where Godzilla is more the anti-hero of that movie. Godzilla is still destroying stuff, and we still have characters who don't agree with the sentiment of letting Godzilla just go and fight Space Godzilla. Yuki is like a primary character, and his point, he does have a point. Like, Godzilla is destroying stuff, and Godzilla did kill a lot of people, so it makes sense that he would feel the way he does. And ultimately, the actions of humans are what caused both Biollante and then later Space Godzilla, based on what we do know. But in 84, Biollante, Battle for Earth, and King Ghidorah, Godzilla is still the main villain of those movies, and especially King Ghidorah by the end of it. Even though Godzilla had come back to defend Japan against King Ghidorah, he is still the antagonist of the latter half of that movie. So there is that. And then in the Millennium series with 2000s, Godzilla is far more animalistic in that movie, where it's he's like essentially just defending his territory because he lights Japan up after that, and he's antagonistic throughout that entire film as well. Same thing with Megaguirus, GMK, that's obvious. And with Tokyo SOS, there technically is the retcon where Godzilla was drawn because of Mechagodzilla, but against Mechagodzilla, Godzilla was drawn to Japan before Mechagodzilla's bones had even been salvaged. So there is that. And then with Final Wars, the only reason why he's fighting in cities is because like humanity's essentially been wiped out, so there's really no humans to actually be killing in those fights. But with the MonsterVerse, the problem is that they're saying Godzilla is nature's balance, and they use the term natural order a lot. And even in this, in the book, because Bernie appears in the book, and Bernie talks about like Scylla, because there are actual scenes like everyone's been seeing the whole moment where Godzilla shoulder checks Scylla in a trailer. I think it was a Chinese trailer. We actually get to see the lead up into that scene there, and Bernie talks about Scylla disrupting the natural order. But the problem is that there is no concrete explanation for the audience what the natural order is, because the monsters hadn't been seen in years, and the monsters that are like around were on the fringes of society as like cryptids and stuff, if we're going to take what Legacy of Monsters says about Titans and the like. So were we in a state prior to 2014 to where the natural order wasn't really occurring, so therefore Godzilla is actually enforcing the natural order, and we still don't know where it is that the natural order sits, or like, do the writers just not really know what the natural order is? And I think that's the problem, is that since we don't really know what the natural order means in a world with these fantastical elements that needs to be world builded, it can't really be used as a proper benchmark for good guys and bad guys, because even we, the audience, don't know. And that could be cleared up with an interview, but then if that becomes something in an interview, people are going to take that as gospel. And then if other movies don't follow to that, that messes more with the world building, which is why, like, I don't think anyone's asked that before. So there's that. And yeah, go.
And I think part of that, like, understanding what the natural order is I think the overall mystery of the MonsterVerse that we're still trying to solve. And I think that's sort of what the buildup has been going to with these movies. Because we start with like 2014, and Serizawa was like, I believe like Godzilla is the key to coexistence, and you see that continue to where now with GXK we have the line from the trailer like the Titans were the like guardians of nature, and the Kong species was like specifically the protector of humanity. So I think we're gonna learn more about what that natural order is in this film.
I guess like at this point, it is technically fair to say that is true, but because we have seen where this idea of the natural order has come, it is now the prerogative of New Empire to then contextualize what that term means for the rest of these films, because I'm going to bring it up here since I did screenshot a few things, but the PowerPoint I made was too big, so I couldn't really just put it in StreamYard. So we're good looking at directly from PowerPoint itself. So specifically here, and this is ignoring the fact that like this comic does have scaling issues. Like in this comic here, this Skier Buffalo should be massive, but when they actually show other shots of it, it's kind of big, but not like huge, gigantic for Skier Buffalo standards. But at least this guy right here is like, this is ridiculous. You call this hunting, because like Raymond's whole point is that he's hunting these monsters because he wants to destroy them because they killed his family and all that. But he's like, where's the sport? Sneaking up and blasting them. They're not even predators. It's like fishing with a bazooka. But like, I never took the picture, but in the comic, you actually have him sneaking up on a warbat and killing it. And the warbats are definitely predators. We know that from the movies. So it makes the thing he's saying makes sense in the context here, because he just killed like a harmless herbivore that we know is like the harmless herbivore creature of this universe. But the other monsters that he's seen fight, one of them is like another felid monster, and this is like just a buffalo. There's very clearly some of these are predators, and if some of these got up to the surface, they'd kill humans. So the point doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it feels like that line is only there to justify this line where the guy's like, where you think you can find 300 an hour elsewhere. Like it feels like it's set up just for this line here, where in reality, if any of these other Titans got to the surface because of Axis Mundi or other things like the Dunkleosteus looking fish monster from Dominion, the murder fish, if like one of those had gotten out without Godzilla's attention, then you'd be dealing with a whole lot of issues there. So, like, the idea of humanity putting like its own destiny in its own hands isn't necessarily a bad thing, because the job of the comic ultimately is to justify Godzilla's presence. And I think the reason why it's lacking is because obviously we're fans, so we're going to side with Godzilla because it's Godzilla. And Black's video is at least effective because it's looking at it from an in-universe perspective and then seeing how can you, like, where's the writing to justify these things occurring. Because even though I don't show it here, on this side, we have a clip of, like, Kong eating something and then, like, sensing or hearing the death of this skier buffalo. And that's what gets Kong over to fight this monster, like, not a monster, the mecha. But, like, is the natural order in this case that, well, since Kong's killing to survive, so therefore it's okay for Kong to kill, but not fine for these guys to do it. And it makes sense why they're using the friendly Titan that everyone knows as, like, the victim here, because it makes sense, even though a few pages later it contradicts it, because we do know that he does kill predators as well. And, like, that just runs into questions I have regarding everything. But, like, it feels more like Godzilla is in this universe justifying his rulership over humanity by making us reliant on him, but that comes at the cost of certain people's lives to have Godzilla be the savior. Whereas, at least in the case of Raymond, even though, like, you could say, like, the guy is twisted, and they even say it on the back that he's like a twisted hunter, what he's doing is ultimately trying to preserve as many lives as possible. And, like, that's the question that comes into play. Like, the only thing that really Godzilla is defending us from are, like, external threats, like the like Ghidorah and technically Scar King as well. But we'll get there when we get there when the movie come out in the next couple of weeks. But it's something to consider, if that makes sense for everyone listening. And the other problem here is that when they set off a radiation beacon for the Lure Godzilla, for the Titan Hunter Lure Godzilla, Bernie comments on the fact that, yeah, I'll zoom in here for all you guys. They say it's like an excuse for the military industrial complex to keep spending. It's like, oh, everyone hates the military industrial complex, we'll do a jab at them because haha, they're so weak versus Godzilla. But when you think about it, the Titan Hunter on its own, which was only like $500 million in terms of its like how much Raymond put in to build the thing, was able to kill several smaller Titans, whereas excluding Awakening, which may not be canon anymore, we haven't seen the military really kill any Titans, and this guy with only $500 million was able to kill several on his own with not much hassle, is able to do this. Why would the military industrial complex invest in stuff like this? So it feels like a lot of having to, like, wanting your cake in terms of your commentary, but then your story is contradicting what it is that you're saying when it comes to this stuff. Because clearly, like, this stuff is, like, it's only $500 million. Raymond doesn't have the same pockets as, like, a government, but, like, after he kills, this is the first feline Titan I was talking about that he kills. He says, like, essentially that, like, he didn't want the energy to go down because he wants to make sure that he's able to fight larger Titans. And throughout the book, like, he doesn't want to fight Godzilla because he realizes Godzilla's too strong, which for power scale is I guess it kind of gives a clear indication, because going up here, he feels like he's going to have to fight Kong in this case ultimately, and feels pretty confident about killing Kong. Whereas with he wanted no part of fighting Godzilla here in this part of the comic. But yeah, and then obviously there's a shot of Kong killing this essentially, like, random guy here. I think that the MonsterVerse doesn't do a good job of, like, making its hero kaijus really hero kaiju, and then, like, moments that are pretty questionable in a logical sense aren't really questioned. But I'm not sure if you have thoughts yourself, Vic, on anything.
I mean, it all sounds pretty interesting hearing it coming from you, and like how these different elements work together, or if some don't. But I guess when it comes to like how these like monsters are characterized and how characters react to them, I guess it just goes back to like learning how the natural world was originally supposed to go, and then
Mhm.
seeing how different elements of those sides play now. Because like Kong was characterized as like specifically a protector of the Iwi people,
Mhm.
and we obviously have him like killing other humans in self-defense of himself and others of his kind as well. So like and then now his species in the past is being set up to be a protector of humanity against the other titans who were like Godzilla, more of generalists when it came to like what they were protecting. Like they had no sides.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's a problem with the progressive story, and like it definitely does feel like a lack of vision in terms of where the MonsterVerse is going with things. Because as outside of Maya Simmons' crew, there's like the people Kong kills on screen and in comics, a lot of them, with Maya being the exception, and then I forget the name of the guy who blew up the Iwi wall. Colin kills a lot of people who honestly really didn't deserve to get killed and were just kind of either doing their jobs, because like there's the Sky Devils guy that he like eats what we don't see on screen, and then there's the other Sky Devils that like get killed because instead of just sort of destroying the stuff and leaving, he like really goes in on this stuff. And then obviously this one guy here who ends up getting crushed, who's like, these people just kind of like are doing it for the money, because like where else are you gonna get like really good money like this? And then with Raymond's case, they set him up as like this guy who's got like an obsession to kill the monsters, but like ultimately, or we'll go to his character here. Like the guy's suffering from some form of PTSD because he's flashing back to 2014 with the Muto attacks. And this is another thing the MonsterVerse introduces, and we're gonna see where this goes. But like he has a AI powered prosthetic, so the guy lost an arm, was heavily injured, and lost his entire family, like mother, father, wife, and kid, to the Mutos, and now put all of his money into working with construction with his company, which I think works with Monarch based on other dialogue you see in the movie, and not the movie, the comic. But the issue is that like he's pretty much in the right in terms of like like humanity having like its own means to defend itself and save as many people as possible, because what we see in the film is like Godzilla, even over petty grudges, is probably killing a whole lot of people in GVK. So there's that.
And the thing
So
is,
oh no, go.
Well, Kong is kind of like that too.
Yeah.
Where in his like when they first face off, like he pretty much crushes an entire highway full of cars, doing his little intimidation display.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Yeah. Or like throwing the jet at the Godzilla when there's a guy still in it. Like there's that issue, and I think that like going back to the idea of the mythologies and all that, had it been established that these monsters are going to act more like early pagan polytheistic gods, in a sense where they're like they'll help humanity, but they're not really defenders of humanity. They have their own like goals, their own grudges, and they'll smite humans for the hell of it. Then like I think that we shouldn't be portraying characters like Raymond in the wrong for like wanting to be specifically on humanity's side. But if we want to make them be like the heroes that like the kiddies out of universe can root for, then like you have a lot of these weird situations, because ultimately in universe, Raymond, and also to a lesser degree Walter Simmons, have the right idea in terms of humanity's interest, which is what leads me into like the archetype idea I have for like all the MonsterVerse like main protagonists. And it comes from Moby Dick specifically, and I dub it the Ahab archetype, where it's these characters who have like an obsession with like these larger than life characters and creatures, and that ultimately drives their decisions. And with 2014, we have that with the Brody father and son dynamic with Emma and Mark, more to Mark's degree because he's trying to kill it, like how Ahab's trying to kill Moby Dick. And then with Walter Simmons also having Godzilla and the Titans being his great white whale, and the same thing here with Raymond. And I guess like at least in Moby Dick's case, it's more of a obsession with a particular creature, but like all the Titans fill a similar role in terms of like Moby Dick's relation to the white whale, not Moby Dick, Ahab's relation to Moby Dick. So like overall, like there's no nuance to these stories, and then ultimately at the end of the story, I think I'm not sure if I show it here or not. No, I don't think. Yeah, so right after here, where he talks about how much the Titan Hunter cost, he ends up getting killed by these two juvenile versions of the Titan that he killed. Different Titan, by the way, than the first one he kills, but they do a really poor job of setting up villains that they never use again, or they'll just kill them off so you don't have to worry about using them, because obviously Jonah, we're never going to probably see Jonah again, and he's like the only villain that actually lived through something. Walter's dead, and now Raymond's dead. Obviously Sarazawa's son's dead, so there's that. Are the Lion Kaiju the only new kaiju in the comic aside from the mecha? So the Titan Hunter's new. This Lion Kaiju's cubs are new. This is what their mother looks like, although these are concepts. So they essentially look closer to this in terms of skin tone, but look like that as adults, kind of. There's a few differences here and there. And then there is, where is it? There's this feline creature, which is different from like these, like the mother of this creature, but they're like two feline creatures. And I guess like, I'm not sure if this was intentional. If I want to say that it is, but I don't have any proof, because like it feels like they kind of set up Raymond as like a big white hunter stereotype, but they try to give him a tragic backstory to make his actions justified, because like rich white guy kills like two lion, quote unquote lion kaiju, and then a buffalo, which are really common African creatures. And like there's a lot of stigma that people have about people get like trophy hunting, and that's essentially what he's doing, because there's I know Godzilla guy had a short where you actually see the panel of him having taxidermied a lot of creatures that he killed, which are all creatures from Skull Island. But yeah, so like I'm not sure if that's like that was kind of like one of the points behind his character, but it feels like that was the point. But they also wanted to make him tragic, so like you could kind of justify what he's saying, but it feels like they're using two different character archetypes, and they want to have their cake and eat it too, which I think is a problem with like a lot of modern writing. But yeah, so there's that. Obviously you can see that they're fighting in the Hollow Earth here. So when we see Raymond go down to the Hollow Earth, he doesn't go down in the Titan Hunter. He goes down in a heave, which I wish I just had the digital version so I could show all the panels, but we see a new heave that looks nothing like the heaves in GVK, and doesn't look like the new ones we're going to see in GXK. So like, are people who are rich enough just able to get heaves, or is it because his company is in relation to Monarch, so he was able to get his hands on the heave so he could go down there when he needs to set up the infrastructure that's down there? Again, not explained. I think Godzilla not said it. Divinium was overhyped and glazed too much. Yeah, and I think this comic does the same thing too, where it glazes over too much. But at least like Raymond as a character, I find entertaining, and I wish he had lived through it. And totally unrelated, I only wanted to bring these 3 or 4 panels up here because in all of these here, he just calls Kong a monkey. He's like, stupid monkey. He's like, come on, monkey. Like, it just has that Frieza / Cooler vibe to it. To where he's like beating on Kong and just calling him a monkey. Like, I wish Raymond had survived, because obviously he gets killed here, and like he goes out kind of like a punk, because there's another shot where he's like gulp, and then you hear him like you see the panel with him screaming, and I'm like, wow, you wasted a really good character that could have had like an interesting rivalry with Kong. And like they wanted him to be tragic but also kind of a douchebag, but also enough of a stereotype to where like enough people are going to hate him and like not feel too bad about him dying. And like overall, the ideas are okay, but then like there's so many things that this comic introduces. Like we have the fact that like we now have full-on AI prosthetics. So like Raymond has a prosthetic and he can operate this thing enough to where he's able to kind of throw hands with Kong. He obviously doesn't beat him, but he can fight pretty well with it and uses like a regular arm. So there's that. Obviously, like Raymond can poach monsters off either in the Hollow Earth or off Skull Island without Monarch noticing. The first monster that he kills, this one right here, he was able to trank it with a bunch of like giant, like almost electric harpoons. So there's now tranking that we can do for lower level Titans. And again, I didn't show this panel here. I just wish I had the digital. Kong in the comics sees a cave painting of Shimo. So if Kong doesn't know about Shimo or doesn't recognize Shimo at all, that's going to be a contradiction to the comic, which is a problem only because they're saying this is a prequel to the movie. So if you're not going to keep consistent, why make this a so-called prequel? Like I said, Raymond's able to create false nuclear meltdown flags to lure Godzilla away. So that's another tech that's probably not going to be explained. For power scalers, I guess my notes are that like he's pretty with like essentially like a new mech in the first of its kind. He felt pretty confident about fighting Kong, either because he was like souped up because he'd already killed a bunch of Titans, so he thought he could take on Kong. But I'm not sure if that means that like Kong is just still objectively weaker than Godzilla, which seems to still be the case. But there's that. The whole thing where like Bernie's still doing his podcast, but he's not part of Monarch, but he has like sources that like let him know where things are going, because he essentially narrates over all of Godzilla's like activities throughout the story. And we actually see like the run up into the, like I said, the shoulder check in the trailer. So there's that. I mean, like I bought it primarily because I didn't know really that the Titan Hunter was gonna be in the comic. I think that like Raymond's character is the best part of this comic. And only because like I want to see how much of this actually leads up into the movie and like what gets contradicted, what doesn't, and what more world building doesn't get brought over. So there's that. Like I think the comic's just like average, like 4 out of 10, 4.5, nothing too crazy. And of course, like Vic, you haven't read it yet, so I'm not sure really what you can gauge based on what like I'm saying. The few comic panels I do have here. So yeah.
Personally, I think I might try to, if I see it in the wild, or something like that, I might nab it.
Yeah, because I got it at Barnes
honestly,
and Noble, so you can probably get it at like a Barnes and Noble near you, or can have one shipped to a Barnes and Noble if you want. So they're doing orders essentially. So there's that. And you can get probably off Amazon now or other booksellers. So retailers do have them now.
I work next to like across the street from Barnes and Noble, so I'll probably
Oh, there
swing
you go.
by
Yeah.
whenever I have the time. Because honestly, from what the pictures I see in the synopsis, I guess you're saying, it's a pretty interesting story from the sound of it. I would like to read it for myself and
yeah,
see what
I
episodes
find the
come in.
concept interesting. The executions where I think it was lacking. And Javara had asked, does Godzilla fight a kaiju? And like he's essentially following Scylla, because Scylla is responding to the false nuclear reactor signals, but then is actually like attacking nuclear depositories and like weapons and stuff, and Godzilla's kind of following up after it, which further adds to like the issues that Black raises in his video and the issues I have about like the natural balance and stuff like that, because Godzilla's not actually stopping Scylla until they actually get to Rome, which is where it stops the Godzilla part of the story and leads into the fighting GXK. But yeah, I'd say that's where that is. That's probably, I think, what I've got. I'm not sure, Vic, if you've got any other things you want to say before we wrap it up.
Well, speaking back to Black Aruni's video and how you say like Raymond here is characterized along with like I guess other villains of the MonsterVerse we've seen, and how in a way they're sort of in the right for the actions they take. Like from what I've seen in the MonsterVerse and seeing this here, I would say the way that they're in the wrong is more so not exactly the motives or the reasonings, but like just in the execution of their what their wants are. Because like an analogy that I would posit is that like if me and my brother went on a hike and he was mauled and killed by a bear, am I in the right to then go on the mission to drive all bears to extinction?
I guess to drive all the issue is that like unlike bears to where like you're not gonna see a bear destroy a city, the Titans do seem to like get out and can get to the surface and do things before Godzilla can get to them. So ultimately, if a Titan's running around, Godzilla can be too late to save people. And unlike with a bear, to where like I think it's understandable if someone had like a vendetta against a bear that killed a family member, because like if you're like, the idea is like people are like, oh, go hike out in the woods and like be in nature, do this, touch grass and stuff, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna go hike out in the woods, and then they get attacked by a bear, and if someone's like, I'm gonna go kill that bear, kill my brother, I'm not sympathetic to people who are like, well, the animal's just doing what an animal does, like the animal isn't evil, but like it still killed a family member of yours. Like, it makes sense that someone wouldn't necessarily take to that kindly, but then like it also comes to that fact where like you're dealing with people like, I don't want to go out, like I don't want to go hiking. Like, I mean, it's rare that a bear attacked, but a bear did attack like my family and killed someone. I just don't want to do it. And like, I guess like when we're thinking again, this is why the Extended Cinemas video is interesting, because like he goes super broad into like things about people's perspective on things. And I think that like if people draw certain perspectives from experiences and don't apply them to a super huge macro scale, it makes sense that they would develop certain beliefs. So why didn't they have multiple kaiju targeting the power plants and still as the last one Godzilla hunts? I guess probably they were under like there's probably a mandate to be like, Scylla's gonna be in the movie, so make the comic this way. I know there's a leak from the movie that there's other monsters appearing early on, but it seems to be the case. And for people who are wondering, this is me not telling you what I saw in spoilers, but only off of what is in this comic and what we've seen in the trailer. We do know that Godzilla was kind of chilling in the Colosseum and then fights Scylla in Italy. And we know that happens in the comic as well. My idea is probably that we'll see Scylla and Godzilla's fight in Italy first. Godzilla then takes a nap in the Colosseum, and then he's probably going to respond to Shimon's Scar King, which is what causes Godzilla to then finally leave Italy. I could be totally wrong, but that is at least what I think is probably the case given what we're seeing here. And that's if the comic and the movie are consistent with one another. But again, neither here nor there. But yeah.
And I would say when you refer to like the idea of like I think it would be more justifiable if like when it comes to like a bear killing a family member, if the surviving member like had a vendetta against that specific bear
Yeah,
and
that's
went
what I
after
said,
it,
yeah.
that's a little more justifiable. But like the analogy is sort of in the sense that like there are other, and I think the whole point of like why these villains are characterized that way and how the heroes go about it in these movies is that it would be better. I think it would be better for me in the aftermath of a bear killing my brother to, rather than say go on a mission to drive all bears to extinction, to advocate for better understanding of bear behavior, better safety precautions in national parks, and maybe
I guess, but then
more.
like then you get into the complicated issues where like say like you go with bear mace and like you use your bear mace, didn't work, the bear was just so happened to like be determined to like kill a family member and brother dies. Like unless like you're packing at that point and like you're walking around armed and you just happen to see someone else sees a bear, that could spark other things too. Like if like because of your actions, more people go into like parks armed. People like maybe someone gets a little too aggravated because a bear gets a little too close, bear attacks, they kill the bear. Then people are like, well, if it becomes this like weird trickle down effect, especially with like people's perception on things, to where they be like, oh, had you not been advocating, more people wouldn't have gone into national parks armed, and then they wouldn't have killed this bear. This bear didn't do anything. It puts the it puts the person in a no-win scenario, because ultimately there are there are certain things that we expect people to do, and it's like, sure, but then there's also things like, this is bad that humans do this. So like, someone says, oh, well, if you're afraid of bears, don't go in the national parks. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna just chill in just normal parks and cities and stuff. These are fine, they're regulated, and that's good. People are like, oh, well, not like parks and cities are bad because they're not actual parks, blah blah blah, hurting the environment and stuff like that. And you're always gonna have that vocal minority, and you're never gonna get that perfect answer. But at least in the case of the MonsterVerse, I think the reason it was clever that they used the Skier Buffalo as a way to talk about like the idea of Raymond being like this twisted hunter, because it's the one monster everyone knows as being like the inoffensive one, because we see it trying to be saved by Weaver, and then we see it killed by a skull crawler, and there's already that kind of perception built up of this animal in the MonsterVerse to where it serves its purpose thematically to be the way it is. But then like you see Raymond kill two other like carnivorous monsters in the felines, and then in the Warbat, which the Warbat has killed humans. The other ones, if they did escape, probably would be hurting humans one way or the other. And the like Titans are not just animals in the sense where like they're in like isolated areas, and like the idea of them coming to somewhere super super populated and killing people is like never going to happen. Like even small Titans are going to kill a lot of people, and there's no reason to say, because in the comic it shows that Godzilla isn't fast enough to stop Scylla. So clearly there isn't a foolproof plan to save everyone. And that's why like tying the idea of people trying to like defend humanity with mechs is tied to a character that we're supposed to look down on doesn't work, because it's twisting thematic messaging. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think also for the MonsterVerse context, I think it would be entirely appropriate for humanity to create defenses against like I guess more malevolent Titans, because I would posit that most Titans are ultimately driven more by like animalistic instinct than pure malice. Because something like Ghidorah was more malevolent than like Behemoth or Tiamat or any other of the other established kaiju. Like he was, I think he's going to be more different than Scar King, who is being characterized as like the worst parts of humanity instilled into a kaiju. And so I think regarding back to the analogy, I think personally overall it would be better to it would be a better thing to do to advocate for things to things to avoid and defend yourself better than actively going out to kill or drive something to extinction.
I guess like and then the other problem that runs into is the fact that like now we've seen two mechas, Titan Hunter and Mecha Godzilla. One of them was like technically half baked into like King Ghidorah, so that's why Godzilla was after it. And in this case, he's trying to like drive things to extinction. His whole justification is because these things attack cities, but then like he's setting off beacons so that Godzilla doesn't fight him, which makes me wonder, does he think that like, is he trying to lure Godzilla away because he says I don't want Godzilla near my hunting grounds, but like if he's killing Titans, it does seem to be that like the authors are inadvertently implying that only Godzilla can deal with Titans, but then in the comic it shows Godzilla unable to stop Titans from doing stuff, causing the deaths of some people, so therefore justifying what Raymond is saying, but then also trying to condemn him in the worst way possible, but then also condemning the government with the military industrial complex. There's so many wires that are tangled, and I think the people writing like don't really have a solid idea, and the ideas they do have are not as clear as I think they think it is, and because of that it hurts the overall world building. But
in a way, yeah, I would agree in some aspects of that. Because like again, like if he wants to stop these Titans because they're destroying cities, like why would you then like have something to lure Godzilla and other Titans like into the cities because you just want to test drive something, you know?
Yeah, because like ultimately the reason why he sets off the beacons near cities and near populated areas is because he's trying to mask the beacons as being fake. So like he puts them near reactors and the like because it makes it seem realistic. And actually the scene where you see him like flash back is like he's like not really too happy with his staff because for some reason his staff had no clue another Titan would show up and they thought only Godzilla would appear. But given the fact that like it's implied they work with Monarch, you'd think that like he would then be able to like be like, oh, so like how like why was Godzilla lured the way he was, or like would other Titans be lured to locations because of this reason or that reason? There's like logical questions that these characters could ask, which would then alleviate the story. But the story wants to show Raven as a bad guy, but then doesn't do the leg room to like show him being at fault in a way that makes sense and is logical with his character, because it feels like he's two different characters. Well, he's not two different characters, two different ideas that are trying, like one is a justifiable response and the other one is like, oh, bad stereotype, let's show him being Batman. And I think this just comes around to the writers.
Yeah, because I think they want to focus on like the methods he uses as what's the bad thing about him. I would say from what I see.
And I guess like, but then the other issue is like, then don't have him be like, don't have him put a beacon near a reactor, have another Titan appear, because for some reason his team, even though they're in contact with Monarch, couldn't do the basic research to be like, maybe another Titan may come, let's put it somewhere else so that if another Titan does appear, Godzilla's going to fight that Titan, or they're just going to go away and you have enough time to still do your test drive or like do your hunting. And then if you're going to do that, then don't cut from him being like, don't cut from his incompetence of his staff to then him having a flashback, which is ultimately to justify and fill out his backstory. They're trying to like, it's trying to do so much and then accomplishing so little and then bungling it. Which I think a lot of people are concerned with GXK. But yeah. And I guess like this also just applies to my own writing. Like these are the questions that I have about my like the factions I develop, the characters I have, and it is through like these dialogues that I have that makes you go back to the drawing board, because well, if this is the case and this could make sense, then what about all of this train of logic that could cause this to happen? And like it's hard, and like when you're doing this as a business, like you have deadlines and all that, and like these things are ignored. But I think that like that's like where our in business clash, because you need like these questions to be asked if you want like good product. Like I guess like even for yourself, Vic, like how often do you see yourself like going through like these ideas in your head in terms of like logical consistency in your world that you've been writing? Because obviously you've been doing stuff as well.
Yeah, I guess with me, like when it comes to like handling like with themes and like story beats I want to portray, I have to make sure that it pretty much flows consistently and things make sense. Like I'll write something and then with an idea of a theme, and then I'll go back and read it again and see if like I'm consistent within like characters, motives, and then like methods they use in order to get to like something that thematically makes sense.
Like it's fine to have characters be wrong or characters be villains, but like when you hear people like characters say something, you see also what is portrayed outside of their sphere of knowledge and the world itself. That's where you like run into so many issues. And the primary reason why the Godzilla 98 comprehensive critique like first part is taken so long is because there's like one part that's like very early in the film that there's a bit of dialogue that doesn't make a whole lot of sense based on like what the implied context is, and it derives so much of the plot because of how early it is. that I keep having to keep watching the film again and again, and then going through the logic tree of like, this actually is causing this action. If had this not occurred, what would have happened? And that's what's important about dialogue, is because even if your logic train doesn't make sense, you're still building off of the logic of your previous dialogue, and therefore like things like occur even based on flawed logic, and that can ultimately cause a story to become worse because of a poor foundation, which is what I talked about in the Rick the Rodent video / stream. But I think we're coming in about 3 hours, so I think we'll probably end
hit
it
3 hours
here. Yeah, no, we just hit 3 hours. I think I'm probably gonna make the Sunday streams a little shorter, and then the other streams a little longer for people to really dig their teeth into those. So I think you all, for the people who did come by and listen and watch all this stuff, thank you. But obviously, Vic, since you're the main guy here, so we'll let you chill a little bit to end things off.
All right. So my name is Vic. You can find me on multiple social media platforms. I go by Vic Monstrous or Vic's Monstrosities on my main art Twitter. I'm currently working on commissions. My commissions are open. You can find me on Ko-fi, Artistry, or just shoot me a DM. I'm also working on writing short stories, more art, and also more videos in the work. Hoping to get more stuff out there for you guys. So hopefully if you want to support me and check my stuff out, that's where you can find me. Check Crispy Vic on Twitter, Instagram, Vic Monstrous, or Godzilla 98 Appreciator, or Kaijuna on YouTube.
Awesome. And for all of you guys, you can find me at Zimzola99 almost everywhere. OG_Zimzola99 on Twitter. Zimzola99 #7775 on Discord. Which obviously, for all you beautiful people who do not have a Discord in terms of what's it called? Like, if you're not in the Discord, but you do have a Discord and you want to join the Discord. So if you guys have projects, like you have maybe a kaiju idea that you want to talk about, that's the place you want to contact me. I want to have more conversations about kaiju and world building there. So I'm going to drop the Discord link here for people in the stream chat. If you haven't joined, please join. I would greatly appreciate it. I want to keep building the community for you guys. And it also helps you get more opportunities onto things like the roundtables. Even if you're not a guest, I can get some of your art on here so we can talk about it more. So there is that. And yeah, that's about it. If you don't have a Discord, if you have Instagram, anything else, that's just contact me there. But I do recommend people sign up for Discord just to join in with the community, because it helps us grow. And that's it, guys. Have a wonderful stream, and thank you all for stopping by.